All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we got a fun one. A major thank you goes out to Michael for sponsoring today's stream, in which we're going to be diving into Helena Blavatsky and her sort of perennial spiritual theology for the industrial age known as Theosophy. So today, the way that I structured today's stream is I'm going to begin by talking to you guys about potentially, why Helena Blavatsky may be, in fact, one of the most important people of the 19th century. Now, when you think of people of the 19th century, you got Napoleon at the beginning of the 19th century. Depending on how you feel about the Edison-Tesla dispute, you got Tesla and Edison, both during the 19th century. Abraham Lincoln during the 19th century. Anyways, a lot of different people. So is Helena Blavatsky the most important person of the 19th century? I don't know. But I am going to make the argument today, and this is the general thesis and premise of today's stream. I am going to make the argument that Helena Blavatsky and what she set down as the initial framework for Theosophy is essentially the architecture of the religion behind the modern world. So if you at any point believed in cosmic Christ spirituality, that's Blavatsky. If you ever reinterpreted karma and reincarnation from a Western perspective and divorced it from, traditional Hinduism, but think karma is happening in your daily life, right? It's not something that's waited for your next reincarnation, but karma is happening all around you. That's Blavatsky. If you ever believe that maybe there's these ascended masters, right? These incredibly spiritual entities that are initiating very specific gifted individuals around the world into the true understanding of the universe and God and how we got here as Homo sapiens, that's also Blavatsky. So I got 9 reasons why I'm going to argue that Helena Blavatsky has legitimately set up the religious, or I would call hidden or esoteric, religious framework of the modern world. Because what was Blavatsky doing? We're going to get into her life. We're going to get into her texts. Isis Unveiled. This was her attempt to sort of destroy the materialism of the West. And then in volume 2, so the first one is really a critique of Darwin and this material approach to evolution. So the first volume destroys materialism, at least her attempt to, and rightfully so, because, well, we'll get into it. And then number 2 was to destroy Christianity, what she considered a dogmatic religion that is a sort of aberrant transition from this true wisdom religion that she was given by her ascended masters. So we're going to be talking about Theosophy, Helena Blavatsky. I also have a section on why Theosophy is explicitly anti-Christian. Multiple reasons, actually. Again, ironically, Blavatsky grows up in Russia, right? So she was exposed to orthodoxy, and yet she absolutely despises Christianity. And in her Russian context, now she comes from an aristocratic family. This woman comes from money. This is one of the reasons why she got engaged or exposed to some of this esoteric spirituality in the 19th century at a very early age. Turns out, much like the Byzantine Empire, I know how so many people, so many Orthodox brothers and sisters out there, they hear about Rome, the Third Rome theory about Moscow and Russia, but the end of Tsarist Russia, really from the mid 19th century towards the martyrdom of Tsar Nicholas II and his family, Russia at the aristocratic level was increasingly moving away from orthodoxy. And so she grew up in a family in which her father was an aristocratic officer in the Russian military, and he wasn't too fond of religion. Her mother, who actually dies, I believe she's at the age of 10 or 11. Blavatsky's mother passes away. And so she's raised by her grandparents, who, ironically, are also not Orthodox. Her grandmother's very much interested into occult theories. And her grandfather also had a huge library of sort of esoteric occult books. And so when we look at Blavatsky, you immediately think, oh, she comes up in a pretty nice, wealthy family in Russia. She was probably going to church. Actually, no. She is exposed culturally to orthodoxy, but she absolutely despises Christian hierarchy. Priests, bishops, saints, anybody that's part of the hierarchy of the church, she despises. That's why Theosophy is really a total deconstruction of Christian hierarchy, and what she replaces it with is the hierarchy of these ascended masters. This idea that these spiritual teachers she meets in Tibet give her wisdom. Now, did she even go to Tibet? This was something that I spent multiple hours trying to look into, because you talk to a theosophist, they claim that Blavatsky, traveled all over the world, which she did travel extensively through Europe. We know for a fact she went to Egypt. We know for a fact she was in India. We know for a fact she was in Constantinople, Istanbul. But did she ever go to Tibet? Because if she never went to Tibet, the entire foundation of Theosophy falls apart. Because what she does is she replaces actual physical hierarchy in the Orthodox Church with a sort of symbolic hierarchy, a hierarchy of these spiritual entities that have given her noetic and spiritual insight that she can then teach others, and creating a sort of alternative hierarchical structure and a universal spirituality. So this is kind of the foundation. We're going to get into way more details regarding all this stuff. I also have a breakdown of the influences. So two major theosophists that then go on to develop their own spiritualities. Rudolf Steiner in the German context. So we're going to be talking about how the Theosophical Society has essentially fallen apart. And it really all happened at the beginning of the 20th century. I personally would be embarrassed if you're an adult man and you still call yourself a theosophist in the 21st century after, forgeries being speculated regarding Blavatsky's work. Massive amounts of plagiarism in her books. Now, this was a very gifted lady. She had an incredible memory. She clearly read tons and tons of books. But the entire foundation of her spirituality, this idea that these ascended masters gave her access to the Xian, this Tibetan book that's supposed to be older than the Bible, older than the Torah, older than the Vedas in India, all older than all this different stuff. She says, "Oh yeah, they gave this to me, and then they taught me how to read this language that no one has ever heard of. There's no historical evidence of. There's nothing written, and it's not like any other language in the region of Tibet, Nepal, India." And so again, looks like she totally manufactured it, made it up. So, really, really fascinating woman. Very much a fascinating woman, but Rudolf Steiner sort of takes Theosophy, once we get into Anthroposophy, and we're not going to talk too much about it, but I just want to show you how influential Theosophy was. Now, as an institution, I would say when Judo Krishnamurti basically disavows Theosophy, that's kind of the end of the true exuberance that was behind the movement. So if you guys don't know, Krishnamurti was believed to be the Maitreya. I've talked about the term Maitreya before. Maitreya is a concept in Buddhism that it's like the last and final world teacher. And so Blavatsky, again, she divorces Jesus from Christ. Jesus becomes this ideal ascended master, an archetype that all of us can attain. He's no longer the incarnate God. He's a world teacher. And this is going to get picked up by Alice Bailey in her New Age as well. And so she totally demystifies and de-divinizes Christ to somebody that we can all then relate to and we can aspire to, and he's just this esoteric teacher. He had a secret doctrine, the same Gnostic thing. She was a Gnostic. But Rudolf Steiner, let me finish my thought. Krishnamurti was believed to be the second Jesus Christ. And so it isn't until like the 1920s that Krishnamurti, found as a young Brahmin boy in India, that the Theosophical Society believed, and this is specifically Annie Besant, she believed that he was going to be the second coming of Christ, and that he was going to be the vessel in which the world spirit, the Maitreya, was going to infiltrate and then speak to the world. Well, eventually, once he kind of gets of age, he moves to California. He has essentially a cult following. This is before Krishnamurti becomes the Krishnamurti we all know, as this sort of, no religion, no dogmas, no hierarchy. It's just a focus on the present moment and experience. This is what Krishnamurti's spirituality turns into. But before he became the Krishnamurti that we all know through history, he was believed to be, through the Theosophical Society, the second Jesus Christ. And it isn't until he disavows the organization, disavows all the things that they're teaching, and basically arguing that they're becoming the same type of dogmatic religion that they were trying to fight in regards to Christianity specifically, that I would say the Theosophical Society as a legitimate intellectual movement falls apart. At the beginning, when Blavatsky was writing, The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, there was a lot of intellectuals that are part of this movement. And it spanned not only, obviously they moved their headquarters from New York, first founded in New York, then they move it to India. But we're talking about all through Europe, in America specifically. And we're going to get into why did the first headquarters begin in the United States? Why was the United States such fertile ground for theosophical speculation? All that different stuff we'll discuss here in a few. But Rudolf Steiner, when he develops Anthroposophy, what he does is he basically he becomes disillusioned with the Eastern obsession of Theosophy. So Theosophy is a mixture of Gnosticism, Western Esotericism and Occultism, Eastern mysticism, and an attempt to incorporate science, right? Theosophy, for Blavatsky, she was presenting this as the true unity of philosophy, science, and theology, and that Theosophy is somewhere right in the middle, connecting all these things together. But Rudolf Steiner, he kind of goes a new direction, and that's where he develops his sort of new form of Christianity, sort of theosophical Christian focus, because he believed in essentially the general metaphysics of Theosophy, the evolution of races, that we're not just evolving physically, but we're also evolving spiritually as entities, that the Aryans are the current race of humanity. So it's not the same thing as the Aryan concept within the Third Reich. Ariosophy. Ariosophy is also an offshoot of Theosophy, but Ariosophy is the sort of occultism that was prevalent in regards to Nazi Germany. But Rudolf Steiner wants to re-Christianize Theosophy, and that's really what Anthroposophy is. And that's why he then takes Christ and then reincorporates him as the solar symbol of the universe, but still has a lot of the theosophical undertones, metaphysics, theology. So it's not exactly a traditional form of Christianity. And then you get Alice Bailey, at the beginning of the 20th century, who basically takes Theosophy and almost puts a new political veneer on it, about this globalism, these initiated masters. She writes 24 New Age books, essentially founds the New Age movement. So when you're talking about ancient astronauts, von Daniken's ancient astronaut theory, where's that come from? That comes from Blavatsky and Theosophy. So when we're talking about the human potential movement, ancient astronaut theories, the New Age movement, spiritual but not religious, Christ consciousness, the whole yoga, Eastern obsession movement, the sort of consumerism of Buddhism, all of this can really be pointed back to Blavatsky. So that's what I'm going to be opening here with my 9 reasons why I believe that Helena Blavatsky and Theosophy actually shape and build the architecture of the hidden religion behind the modern world, and I'm going to show you that. So smash that like, guys. Yeah, cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, that you're a god, the idea that all of us, apotheosis, all of this stuff is rooted within Theosophy. And even though Theosophy is not the movement it was during the life of Blavatsky, or even the 30 years after Blavatsky, The ideas that she put forth are so saturated in the Western world. When we are talking to, if you talk to anybody who's not a traditional Christian, they are going to have incorporated some of these concepts. It is literally the water we swim in, just like Darwinian evolution is something you can't get out of if you're in the academy dealing with any sort of scientific research or discussions. But we're going to dive deeper into all this stuff. So smash that like. Mr. Fist throws in $5, says, just finished the Joe Rogan, Andrew Wilson episode, and this stream starts. What a blessed day. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, isn't that awesome that Andrew was able to get on Joe Rogan? That was so cool. That was so cool. You know, Andrew actually called me before, well, a week ago, because I was supposed to go to Texas this last weekend to help him with a project. And the recent winter storm obviously pushed everything back. So I'll be leaving Friday morning to actually go down to Texas and work with Andrew on a new project he's putting together. But he called me on the phone and he said, yeah, I'm going to be going on Rogan in a week. And I was like, wow, dude, that's incredible. That's incredible. So I just talked with Rachel yesterday. She was actually texting me while Andrew and Joe were actually recording their interview. I had no idea it was going to turn around and be the next day that they were going to post it. I thought the Joe Rogan episodes like take a few days before they actually post those, but they recorded it yesterday and it was out today. So I'm only about halfway through because I was trying to prep for today's stream. I wanted to put my document together. So my sort of study guide for each of these topics, and I watched one of the new Theosophy documentaries for today's topic. It's so cringe. But yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. And Mr. Fista also want to mention that if we reach today's super chat goal of 30 super chats here on YouTube, I will be gifting 2 Return to Babylon books to some super chatters. So if you super chat today and we reach the 30 super chat goal on YouTube, I will be gifting and sending out a book to 2 different super chatters today. So that's the goal if we're able to attain the 30 super chat goal. Texas Nevsky throws in 5, says, God bless you all. Thank you so much, Texas Nevsky. Hope you are doing all right. You're not freezing. I saw, Texas doesn't really handle this winter weather the same way. I have actually friends, in Tennessee around the Nashville area. Keep those people in your prayers. I mean, their power was out for multiple days. It's still out. I have a friend, the Eschaton Vigil. The Eschaton Vigil, his power has been out since Saturday night, since the storm started. So we're now on Wednesday evening. They've had 0 electricity, and I was reading an article, at least according to 2 days ago, 450,000 people around the Nashville area do not have power. So keep those people in your prayers. Hopefully they're getting the power turned on. But unless you were prepped to try to stay warm, I mean, it's a kind of a scary situation for some people. Texas Nevsky, the weather has been beautiful here in the Houston region. Well, I know Dallas got hit with the storm. I don't know if you guys even still have snow on the ground or not. But anyways, thank you for that. Let me see. Josiah Elleron throws in $15 over on Dono Chat. Thank you so much, Josiah. He says, God bless you for your amazing work, brother. Well, thank you so much, Josiah. God bless you, man. I really appreciate you. And we had a super chat that came in from Victor Z. Says, interesting topic. Almost 50K. That is true. I don't know if you guys have seen the subscriber count. We are almost at 50,000. So I've been trying to be way more methodical with posting content. You guys may have noticed recently that I've been posting clip videos and YouTube shorts way more frequently. That has actually totally amplified my channel in regards to, not major amplification, but in regards to getting new subscribers. So I think I've got about 3,000 new subscribers in, over 3,000 in the last 28 days, just from like hammering posting. So definitely going to continue to do that. But yeah, we got less than 500 more subscribers. We'll be at 50,000. We'll have to have a huge celebration stream. I've made that a goal for so long to try to get to 50,000. So I'll be very, very excited once that's the case. Josiah says, God bless your work. Thank you so much, brother. God bless you. Hope you're doing well. All right. So with that being said, let me get into my little opening monologue. It's not going to be too much. And then what we're going to do is watch a little bit of a video. So this is from an esoteric channel. It's like 29 minutes long, but it does do a good job of sectioning off different topics. And so we're going to watch a little bit about who Blavatsky is, her life, and then I'll fill in more details through my study guide. Then we'll flip over and learn about the books, Isis Unveiled, that being a sort of the deconstruction book, the wrecking ball book, and then she follows up with the Secret Doctrine, actually setting forth then essentially her perennial religion for the industrial age, because that's what she does. She revives the Pisca Theologia. The Prisca Theologia of the Renaissance, this idea that there was a theology, an ancient theology that all world religions and spiritualities are built upon. She amplifies this through what I would argue. I am a skeptic, so I don't know if we got any theosophists in the audience. I am a theosophical skeptic. I do believe that the whole Zion book is forged, the secret letters. I believe many of the things were frauds. I mean, the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, out of London, if you guys are familiar with Friedrich Myers, and they tested essentially, abnormal events, spiritual phenomenon, telepathy, all this different stuff, channeling. They deemed Blavatsky a fraud. That's what they deemed back in the late 1800s. So this was just kind of right before she ends up passing away. They claimed that you can't say she's dumb. But from their research and investigation into her works and some of her supernatural abilities, they showed how you can actually do that. They performed demonstrations where people from the Society of Psychical Research would literally perform what were supposed to be supernatural abilities attributed to Blavatsky and other people at the time, and show how this was a sort of manipulation of perception and things like that. They deemed Blavatsky a fraud, but they said she may be the most impressive imposter in history. That's the way the Society of Psychic Research referred to Blavatsky. Potentially the most impressive imposter in history. All right. Let me lay out here what I want to discuss as Blavatsky's religious architecture for the modern world. So, how is it that Helena Blavatsky's theosophical system is truly the hidden religion of the modern world? Well, let me explain. I have 9 points. The first one, and probably the most obvious one, is modern perennialism. She systematized and popularized the idea that all the religions are truly equal. Now, we've talked about this Prisca Theologia concept, which comes out of the Renaissance. You can point to people like Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Piccadella Mirandola, Christian Kabbalah, the influence of Neoplatonism. Why is that influential? Because Neoplatonism metaphysically focuses on and presupposes the supremacy of unity, of the one. Therefore, everything must be equal. And so this Renaissance Prisca Theologia, as we talked about, kind of set the stage for the most magical century in Europe, the 16th century. This is where you get the archetype of the Renaissance magi, the magician, the alchemist, Paracelsus, all these different individuals, John Dee, Henry Cornelius Agrippa, all these famous occultists of the 16th century, the 1500s, which is coinciding with the same century of the Protestant Reformation. Well, during this century, we've talked before about this blending of Hermeticism and Protestantism, and that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood was believed themselves to be setting the global stage for a true new university, a true brotherhood of humanity. This is exactly the way that the Theosophical Society presents itself, as the continuation, essentially, of what the universal aims of Rosicrucian were. Now, given the historical context, We've talked before, and I discussed this in my book, Return to Babylon, that you have this explosion of esoteric studies, Western esotericism, occultism, alchemy, hermeticism. And this idea of perennialism first begins in the Iberian Peninsula when the Umayyad Empire, the Caliphate there in Spain, was allowing the Christian mystics, the Jewish mystics, and the Muslim mystics to come up with these new techniques. This is where we get the Zohar. This is the official text of Kabbalah. Kabbalah was very influential to Blavatsky. And it's in this Iberian Peninsula where perennialism begins to really make its first appearance. But it begins with those three religions. It begins with the Abrahamic religions. This idea that, oh, the Abrahamic religions are sort of true variations of the same truth. It isn't until Blavatsky where you truly get a universal perennialism. The idea that Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Jainism are on par with the entirety of the Abrahamic traditions. The Abrahamic traditions typically had a step up. Those Eastern traditions were considered to be a little bit more primitive, less advanced, less sophisticated. Blavatsky changes all that. And so what she did is she reframed perennialism as a explicitly non-Christian, she hated Christianity, anti-dogmatic, universal religion. And she claimed all religions are fragments of a single ancient esoteric truth, treated Christianity as a corrupted latecomer, not a fulfillment. And so returning back to our historic timeline, when perennialism was really making its advance, and Frederick the Elector Palatine married Elizabeth Stuart, the daughter of James, King James I of England, Frederick thought he was going to be the king of a Hermetic Protestant kingdom. He was the king of Bohemia, the former seat of the Holy Roman Empire, for basically 6 months. He's called the Winter King. And he loses the first battle at the Battle of White Mountain, which sparked off the 30 Years' War, the wars between the Protestant North and the Catholic South. After the 30 Years' War, Europe is kind of done with all this infighting, and they're kind of done with all this occultism, and that's where you get the Royal Society in 1669. You get official science. And basically, the intelligentsia kind of agrees, okay, we're gonna lose some of the polemical tensions between the Catholics and the Protestants. We're going to focus on the Enlightenment. We're going to focus on reason, on science, on the investigation of nature. That's where these two parties are going to be brought together for the advancement of human knowledge. Blavatsky, you fast forward that, so that's 1669, the Royal Society. By the mid-1800s, so 200 years later, the West has become incredibly materialistic. This is where you get Max Weber, the famous German sociologist, his theory about the disenchantment of the world. That science and rationalism has disenchanted the mystery behind nature, the spiritual phenomenon behind the visible world. Blavatsky is aware of this criticism, and so what she's trying to do with her revivalizing of perennialism is to fill the void. She wants to not only destroy Christianity and knock it off the pedestal as the religion of the West, she also wants to knock off Darwin or the scientific materialism of the time and take these things and reincorporate science, philosophy, and theology into a universal brotherhood and religion. That's the first thing that she does. Now, how has that influenced the contemporary day? If you ever hear anybody say all religions are basically the same, that would not be possible without Blavatsky. Comparative religion and spirituality, which that's what my PhD is religious studies. Well, ironically, the field of religious studies comes out of all this and really begins emerges in the beginning of the 20th century. So it's the beginning of the 20th century where we start to get this idea that we're going to scientifically investigate all the religions, and all the religions are equal. They're just sort of different cultural flavors. Again, coming out of Blavatsky. Interfaith syncretism. What's the big heresy that our church fathers have warned us about during this point in history? Well, it's ecumenism. Ecumenism is the religion of the devil. Well, this idea that all the religions need to stand arm in arm with each other and create this sort of loving, compassionate community, global community, This comes from Blavatsky. Anybody who I myself used to claim that I was spiritual but not religious, where does that come from? That comes from Blavatsky. The idea that you can be spiritual, that spiritual is somehow tied with Sophia, it's tied with wisdom, it's tied with timelessness. But religion for Blavatsky is institutional, it's dogmatic. It must be undermined except in the Buddhist and the Hindu context, because the interesting thing enough is that Henry Occult and Blavatsky go to Sri Lanka to try to revitalize Buddhism because Buddhism is on the waning end during that period. And so what does she do? They go to Sri Lanka, they talk with the Buddhists. Occult builds all these schools to try to teach Buddhism. He writes essentially the Catechesis of Buddhism that is still used today. I mean, it's useful for children, very easy to read, Catechism for Buddhism. They didn't want to destroy Buddhism. They didn't want to destroy Hinduism, but they definitely want to destroy Christianity. So interesting little caveat there. But being spiritual but not religious, that concept that you can even be spiritual but not religious, that you can essentially consume different doctrines and ideas from all the different world religions, that comes from Blavatsky. So that's number one. The number one way in which she has shaped the hidden religious architecture of the modern world is the revival of modern perennialism and essentially creating a spirituality for the industrial age. Because the industrial age is a global age. It's the beginning of globalism. It's the beginning of global trade. So number one, modern perennialism. Number two, this idea of ascended masters, hidden adepts as religious authority. This isn't unique in history. Obviously, different traditions proposed Gnostic teachers, Hermetic sages, Rosicrucian mythologies. I mean, the entire story of Christian Rosenkreuz, which is what Rosicrucianism, the whole brotherhood, the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross comes from, is this mythological figure, Christian Rosenkreuz, who travels all around the world, goes through Europe, goes to Egypt, goes through the Middle East, goes to the Holy Land, goes to India, goes to China, makes his way across Central Asia back to Europe, and then comes back with all these secret teachings. That's Christian Rosenkreuz. That's the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. That's the whole thing that it's built upon. And that knowledge that Christian Rosenkreuz gathered is going to be the liberating ideology for humanity. That's what Rosicrucian is. Well, Allah, that is exactly what Blavatsky's putting forth. And so what she did is she created a living, ongoing hierarchy of invisible masters, replaced bishops, priests, clergy, saints with secret initiates. There's secret initiates everywhere, guys. Claim direct authorization from them. So how does Blavatsky get her authority? Well, she got her authority because the invisible ascended masters gave it to her. She was initiated. Well, then I want to get authority. How do I get authority? Well, Blavatsky will teach me. Theosophy will teach me. I need to become initiated. Again, it's the same framework for any sort of Gnostic or esoteric spirituality. Knowledge brings you towards divinity. Well, the same thing, but my point here in number two is this idea of ascended masters, that there's spiritual entities around us. You see this in the New Age all the time. You see this in channeling movements. How many times have we looked at like Bashar or Abraham Hicks? Who are these people contacting? Well, probably nobody. Probably their own imagination. But why do people give them authority to tell them what to do in their lives? Well, because they're talking to an ascended master. You know, Bashar's talking with some alien on the Pleiades. How do people believe this? Well, they believe it because Blavatsky set the foundation for a concept in which humanity is being guided, informed, and initiated into a new evolution, a higher form. So what is Bashar? Oh, we have to ascend, cosmic consciousness. Abraham Hicks, you got to find your vortex, right? You got to think it, wish it, make it happen, gain it, grab it. You know, this whole positive thinking, manifestation spirituality. But who is Abraham Hicks talking to? Esther Hicks is talking to Abraham, a spiritual guide. And so people then gather around these New Age channelers because what? This idea of ascended masters. Same thing is true with ET contactees. right? From Roswell in the 1940s forward, you see this ascended master theology and spiritual framework begin to be incorporated into ufology. How many people claim that they know certain things because the aliens told them? Same thing's true with psychedelics. I would say psychedelics are a little bit more visceral in the experience. I mean, but people smoke DMT. What do they say? Oh my gosh, I smoked DMT and I talked with the, self-transforming machine elves and they knew everything about me and they told me about humanity. And they said this and that and that. Ascended master theology, spirit guides, higher beings, influencer guru authority without accountability. All of this idea of attaining authority through the perception, whether they are or not, because I don't even believe Blavatsky was initiated in anything, but the perception of being initiated into something sets you as an authority to speak about it. That comes from Blavatsky. Number 3, the Christ principle, the cosmic Christ theology. There would be no cosmic Christ. I'm sure maybe somebody would have came up with it, but we can really point back to Blavatsky in regards to pushing forth this idea of the Christ principle. And again, you can kind of find, if you've read some of the scripture out of the Nag Hammadi Sutras, the, Gospel of Thomas, these various gospels, false gospels, not real gospels, not canonical gospels. But you see these Gnostic Christologies where Christ is sort of tapped into, he's human, but he's tapped into some cosmic power. He's tapped into the plethora of the Gnostic pantheon, the Gnostic cosmology of the realm of pure light, and this Neoplatonic logos speculation. She does use the term logos. Now, she doesn't have great things to say about Christianity at all, and she totally destroys the Christology of who our Lord and Savior truly is. But she is very much taking, basically the metaphysics of her worldview is taking Neoplatonism and then packaging occultism, Western esoteric traditions, and then Eastern mysticism onto it. But the foundation is essentially Neoplatonic. Emanations, the privileging of unity over multiplicity, all this different stuff. So Neoplatonic logo speculation, Gnostic Christology, these existed before Blavatsky. But what did she do? She explicitly separated Jesus from the Christ. Jesus sort of signifies his human nature, the nature he got from Mary the Theotokos. Christ is who he is. Christ is who he always was, the second person, the Logos, the Christos, the anointed one, the chosen, the Son of God. But she recasts Christ as a universal principle. You see, it depersonalizes everything. There is no personal God in Theosophy. It depersonalizes everything. So she makes him this new universal principle for enlightenment. He's indicative, he's sort of archetypal of a stage of evolution. Because what Blavatsky does is she takes Darwin and this concept of evolution, but she hates materialism because it doesn't afford for all the spiritual worldviews that she's putting forth. So what does she do? She incorporates evolution, but says, what the real thing about evolution is not about your physical body. It's not about, the transition between species. It's about spiritual evolution. And so she comes up with this idea of these primordial races that are essentially spiritual beings, something akin to an angel. And so they don't really have physical form, but again, Neoplatonic framework here, they descend into matter until they become the Aryan race, which isn't the same thing as Indo-European Aryan, although clearly it's kind of pointing that direction. She uses Aryan more to symbolize the state of humanity that we currently are, like my physical form, how material I am versus how spiritual I am. She calls that the Aryan race. And that the Aryan race is basically the bottom point of the dissension, and now we're going to start evolving upward until we lose physical form. We turn back into purely spiritual entities. And so she argues that this is what Christ is, and that Christ and being the Christ or the Christos is really just an office attainable by any initiate. So you want to be like Jesus Christ? Well, you got to become a theosophist, you see, according to Blavatsky. And so what she does is totally deny the uniqueness of the incarnation. Now, where do we see this? Christ consciousness spirituality. Anyone who points to Christ consciousness spirituality, which we've done multiple streams debunking and showing, they're pulling that from Blavatsky. Jungian archetypal Christ, right? Well, where did Jung grab some of this stuff? Well, Jung was a Gnostic. Jung was obsessed with occultism. Jung was a perennialist. Jung also read Blavatsky and was inspired by her theosophical framework and this sort of symbolic archetypal understanding of Christ, and that's how he utilizes Jesus Christ and his Jungian psychological approach. So anybody, the Jordan Petersons of the world, that refer back to Jung's concepts of Christ, well, where did Jung get those? From Blavatsky. New Age Jesus, Blavatsky. Progressive / esoteric Christianity, right? How many people do you see? Oh yeah, I worship Yeshua. Don't you know his name was Yeshua, bro? Like, why do you calling him Jesus, man? Like, it's Yeshua, and Yeshua was like totally enlightened, and he's showing us a path for like who we all can be, bro. Okay, progressive esoteric Christianity specifically branches off of Theosophy. Cosmic Christ theology, divorced from any sort of church or dogma. How many people you talk about, oh, I'm Christian, but I don't believe in dogmas. I don't go to church. Okay, was that ever the case in Christian history? No. But where's this idea that people can label themselves something and say they're worshiping the cosmic Christ or Christ, but it's totally divorced from any church authority, any ecclesiology, and any sort of actual theological dogmas? It's Blavatsky. She hated those things. So this move alone dissolves Nicene Christianity, the total Christology and metaphysical framework that Orthodox Christianity is built upon. The next one, number 4, spiritual evolution as the meaning of history. So Hindu and Buddhist cosmology is about reincarnation, and then Enlightenment progress narratives. So with the Enlightenment, as we've talked about before, they truly believed themselves to be on the leading edge of human history, that they were truly unique and superior to any other group of people that formed civilizations prior to them. And so what Blavatsky did is she fused Darwinian evolution with esoteric metaphysics, replaced salvation history, a la Christianity, with cosmic evolution. So instead of Christ being the savior, you're going to cosmically evolve into the same thing. And so she replaced repentance and grace with self-development. How many people describe self-development as them being spiritual? Oh yeah, I just need to spend time like working on myself and like developing myself because I feel like I'm finally finding my higher self. And we'll get into higher self comes from Blavatsky. We see this in the consciousness evolution language, integral theory, New Age progressivism, tech spiritual utopianism, transhumanist eschatology, secularized. All of this is indicative of the theosophical framework, the architecture that Blavatsky set forth. Number 5, westernized karma and reincarnation. So there's the Indian religious, there's the Vedic systems of Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, believing in moksha, enlightenment, releasement from samsara, the cycle of reincarnation. What Blavatsky did is she removed them from ritual, meaning karma and reincarnation, from ritual, caste, and tradition, and then recasted them as universal moral laws, therapeutic identity narratives, and metaphysical justice without judgment. Justice without judgment. Doesn't sound like the progressive left today. We have justice, social justice, but you're not allowed to judge or condemn anybody based on an objective standard. Very indicative, again, the framework that she sets forth. So where do you find these modern influences? You choose this life. Make yourself, sister. You just got to focus on you and develop you. You also hear it as like trauma, karma narratives that, oh my gosh, the reason why I struggle with this is because in my past life, I had all this trauma. The reason why I hate guns is in my past life, I was actually in World War I, and my best friend got upset with me and pulled out his gun and he shot me. And so I just have like a really difficult time with interpersonal relationships, and I just hate guns. I just hate violence. It's because of my karma trauma. This is a westernized form of all this karma reincarnation stuff. This is New Age spirituality. This is spiritual, not religious. This is rooted in Blavatsky. Moral relativism with cosmic consequences, right? Oh my gosh, you didn't know men can be women? And if you don't affirm their identity, you are destroying the universal self within them. Don't you know that that's yourself? Don't you know? Don't you know that you are actually hurting the cosmic self, which you and I all are, by not affirming their pronouns? So there's moral relativism, where actually nothing is immoral. But if you don't affirm it, somehow there's cosmic consequences for it. Pop spirituality explanations for suffering. So all this stuff, this replaces sin, judgment, and the resurrection with basically, well, karma's going to take care of it. And don't worry, you'll reincarnate in the next life anyways. You'll be able to figure out then. If, again, from an Orthodox Christian perspective, is there a greater lie the devil could tell people? Hey, do whatever you want. Karma will work it out. You'll figure it out in the next life. So that was number 5. Number 6, in regards to the architecture, the hidden religion architecture of the modern world, is the higher self. Literally, the concept of a higher self truly gets fully enumerated through Blavatsky. So there was Neoplatonism, Gnostic, and Vedantic concepts before. But Blavatsky popularized this idea of a multi-layered self. That there's a self of your awareness, but then there's a higher self that's more aware, that's more of who you are. It's the self who sees all of your life cycles, who's witnessed all of your reincarnations, who knows all your karma. And so she claimed divinity is already inside man, which, yes, the soul has an element of divinity. We are made in the image of God. But her whole thing is a Gnostic apotheosis, that you're going to divinize yourself through her techniques and her worldview. And so she framed salvation as a remembering, not being saved. How many times have you guys heard that dealing with a New Ager? Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm remembering things. I'm remembering the truths that I used to know in my previous life. I can feel it. My fingers are tingling. Like this type of dumb stuff is totally an outgrowth of Theosophy. And so you see it in self-spirituality, the self-help spirituality. You see it in the inner child, inner God language. Oh my gosh, see, I just need to work on myself because I just need to reach my inner goddess. I just need to let loose my inner goddess, and then my life will finally fall into the places I want. I just haven't been doing the inner work. No. Again, Orthodoxy, we believe in faith and works, but works don't get you there. You got to have faith in Christ. They have faith in themselves, and then they do works in the anticipation that they'll divinize themselves. Identity-based spirituality, therapeutic mysticism, all have incorporated these concepts. And this underwrites modern expressive individualism, that you express yourself, right? What did we talk about with identity historically? It was where you were born, who your family was, your surname, what language you spoke, and what your religion was. That's your identity. That's your identity. Your identity comes with a bunch of fixed layers to it. Now we don't have any of that. Identity in the modern world doesn't matter who your family is, doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter what religion you are. You get to express it. You get to create it. It's the constructive self philosophy that's predominant in postmodernism. Literally, the higher self theology fits totally into that groove. That's my number 6. My number 7th reason why Blavatsky has shaped the hidden architecture of religion in the modern world is that hidden history of religion and civilization, right? What Blavatsky did is she claimed all history is distorted. Everything you know. This is why, we get the Tatarias of the world. You get all these alternative histories. You even get ancient aliens, ancient astronauts. All that stuff comes from this idea that Blavatsky set forth, which was very revolutionary at the time, that everything you know about history actually isn't real. It's all lies. Why? Because, well, the church has been in charge of writing the books for such a long time. They're a bunch of liars, right? You can't trust clergy. You can't trust religious institutions. But you can trust Theosophy, so join our society and donate money. She claimed all official history is distorted and positioned herself as the true and unique revealer of these suppressed truths. So why should you listen to Blavatsky? Well, the Ascended Masters gave her the insight that nobody else has, you see. She has the knowledge. She has the gnosis. And she used secret text, lost continents. Like again, if you've heard anybody talk about Atlantis and Lemuria, it's Blavatsky that popularized these things. You know, searching for the Atlantis myth, which some people believe is in the northern section of the Sahara Desert in Africa. Some people believe it's in the Atlantic Ocean, whatever it may be. Well, she believed all this stuff to be real. She believed that the Lemurians were more human, more material, less spiritual, and that the Atlanteans, they were really advanced. They were really advanced. They kind of had human form, but they're way more spiritual than they were material. That's why their civilization was so advanced. This idea, this obsession with alternative history, with Atlantis, Lemuria, these lost continents, this obsession that we see today that literally takes over the History Channel. Do you guys remember when the History Channel actually did history and MTV actually did music? Those were the good old days. But now you can turn on the History Channel and it's all this stuff. It's all alternative history. It's all ancient astronaut theory stuff, all coming from Blavatsky. And so our alternative archaeology, this is kind of where Tataria comes into place. Conspiratorial spirituality. They don't want you to know this fact, right? Again, I think Jim Bob uses the frame as like the folders, right? The people that are in the truther movement, they have all the folders on every topic. You got to read the folder, bro. You haven't read the folder on the Pleiadians yet? Come on, man. You haven't read the folder on sun worship? Jesus Christ is the S-U-N. He's not the S-O-N, bro. Haven't you read the folder? Right? This idea that everything about the world, they don't want you to know. This mindset comes right out of Blavatsky. This is epistemic rebellion sanctified as spirituality. That's how I put it. Epistemic rebellion, meaning there is no real form of knowledge here. Right? She can't know anything about Atlantis or Lemuria or tell you how they were or what they looked like or what they did, who is more advanced. We don't even have actual evidence that they ever existed. We have Plato referring to Atlantis. We have other people in history looking for these things. I mean, Heimlich Himmler of Nazi Germany, he believed in this stuff. This is one of the reasons why Ariosophy was so interested in Tibet. You guys have watched Indiana Jones. Why are the Nazis in Tibet? Well, it had to do with the aura that Blavatsky created about what Tibet is. She made the Western world believe that the oldest teachings in the world were found in Tibet. And that the Zion, this book that she claimed to have been initiated through, that there's no evidence ever existed. There's no evidence that the language she describes it was written in ever existed. There's no evidence that she ever went to Tibet. That's the big one. There is no actual concrete evidence that Blavatsky ever went to Tibet. At best, she may have met some Tibetan monks in Nepal or somewhere in India. But Tibet was it was very difficult for scholars to get into Tibet in the 19th century, let alone a woman. So I'm very skeptical of her even getting to Tibet, but because she put forth this concept that Tibet is the storehouse of spiritual knowledge, that if you want to know the true story about humanity, the creation of the universe, how we got here, what's being hidden from us, well, you have to go to Tibet. That's what caused some of the occult obsession even in the Third Reich. Because remember, Rudolf Steiner is developing anthroposophy before this stuff really gets going in Germany. So he develops anthroposophy, I think, in 1912. So again, I argue that all this ancient astronaut, this alternative history, not there aren't interesting things about alternative history. I'm not here trying to tell you that you need to believe what the official narrative is about the pyramids in Egypt, or, the dating of Göbekli Tepe, or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. I've looked at, Robert Schoch and Graham Hancock's work about on the Sphinx and redating it as something much older. It's very possible. I'm open to it. But the extremities of the conspiratorial movement regarding alternative history, this is rooted in this theosophical worldview that Blavatsky put forth. Number 8, gnosis over faith. Why is it that in the modern world, if you were to tell someone, I don't have knowledge that Jesus resurrected from the dead, like meaning scientific empirical knowledge, but I have faith. I spiritually know that it's true. I have sort of subjective mystical experience that validates that to be true. Well, people will laugh at you in the modern world, right? Oh my gosh. So you're saying your only basis for believing in Christ is faith? Wow. That must be really strong. How did we get here? Was faith condemned to such a degree in the medieval period? No. What about the Renaissance period? No, not even during the Renaissance. But in rationalism, due to the Enlightenment, fostered this idea that you must know how something works. You don't want to have faith. You want to know how it works through the scientific method, through induction. Well, she just recast that framework, but through a spiritual lens. So instead of science doing all the heavy lifting, it's spiritual knowledge, right? She made knowledge itself salvific. She rejected obedience, humility, the sacraments, replaced prayer with esoteric insight, replaced liturgy with cosmology, right? Our liturgy is cosmological because we believe when you participate in the liturgical service, you are participating in something outside space and time. Well, what Blavatsky did is she elevated gnosis over faith. And you see this everywhere. I mean, every spiritual podcast is about gnosis. You got, spiritual gnosis. It's not about faith. It's not about worship. It's not about all these forms of worship and these traditions of men. No, it's about spiritual gnosis. It's about experience. Go girl, live, love, pray. You need to get out there and you need to go sleep with God. You need to travel the world, girlfriend. It's gnosis. But anybody that's part of this spiritual milieu where secret spiritual knowledge is what really elevates you and brings you closer to God. It's very, very Gnostic. But you see it in information as transformation. This is literally the basis of data. This is the basis of transhumanism. Now, transhumanism, they would kick all the metaphysical, mystical stuff of theosophy to the side, and essentially what transhumanism does is it takes theosophy and just repackages it back into materialism. Where theosophy was a rejection of materialism and dogmatic Christianity, transhumanism just takes aspects of it, especially like the whole evolving thing. We're going to be evolving into technology, evolving into the machine, right? You can see very much a sort of theosophical architecture there, even in a transhumanist movement that is so dialectically at odds with the claims of theosophy. Transhumanism, for some it's spiritual. Again, a la Return to Babylon from Adam and Antichrist. Read my book if you're interested about transhumanism. But it's kind of the same framework. Endless learning without repentance. This is like Alan Watts' worldview, right? Endless learning. Alan Watts, and not that he didn't have insightful things to say, not that you can't maybe learn things from him, but he presented himself as a spiritual teacher, almost like a guru figure, right? And he cheats on his wife with one of the students. Then he marries the student. Then he cheats on the student once they're married with another woman, another younger girl. In his older life, he becomes an alcoholic. He lives on his boat there in Marin County, north of the Bay Area there. Like, you see this spirituality becomes just obsession with learning. Well, what about repentance? What about the fact that, you cheat on your wife? What about the fact that, you're doing things that are objectively wrong? That's where Christianity, that's where you're seeing the cultural tension right now, is that traditional Christians are like outspoken about all the moral wrongs that are happening in our society right now. But most people, they just don't have that concept of repentance, and doing away with that, Blavatsky was incredibly influential for. And so then there becomes this concept of a spiritual elitism. How do people sit and listen to Eckhart Tolle? He's the most nauseating individual to listen to speak. How do people listen to Eckhart Tolle? Well, he's a spiritual elite. He's done so much transcendental meditation, you just can't even understand. You just can't understand what he's actually trying to say. And so this is why modern spirituality produces no saints. No saints, because you can't be a saint without repentance. And so what these people become is their own little Lucifer. Last and final reason that I'm arguing that Blavatsky created the hidden religion, or the hidden religious architecture of the modern world, is a religion for a post-Christian scientific world. That's what her goal was. What did I begin the stream talking about? That Theosophy is the intersection of science, philosophy, and religion, or theology. And she believed that Theosophy was sitting right at the crux of all three of these. And so Blavatsky, you have to understand what she is basically a world synthesizer. She's bringing all these different worlds together to essentially allow the imagination of people to occupy the little world that she's creating. That's what I mean, how influential she is. This little world, this theosophical world she created has had so much influence into the world that we live in 2026. And so she was explicit that this is what the whole secret doctrine is about, right? Her two big books, Isis Unveiled, is a deconstruction of materialism and a deconstruction of Christianity, essentially destroying both of those. That's why I said Isis Unveiled is like a wrecking ball. And then the secret doctrine is her presentation of the thing that's going to replace materialistic science and dogmatic Christianity, a la Theosophy. And so why was she successful in all this stuff of creating a sort of religion to displace Christianity and a rational understanding to sort of butt up against and sort of knock off the pedestal in the Western mantle of materialism? Is because it sounded ancient. She's talking about these ascended masters. She's talking about spiritual books that are older than the Bible, older than the Torah, older than the Vedas. It sounds ancient. It sounds interesting. She quoted science, right? When you read Isis Unveiled, it's just a massive amounts of quotes. Turns out some of the stuff that she claimed that she was writing in her own words wasn't even her own words. She just plagiarized. And I think that it makes sense now. Like, how did this woman, aristocratic woman from Russia, gets married at the age of 17 to a much older man? Immediately upon marrying him, she runs away. And next thing we know, she's traveling the world and learning about spirituality and going to India and America and all this different stuff. Well, how could a woman like that write all these massive amounts of books and convince as many people as she did? Because she was exposed to all this literature at a very young age, and she was able to compile and systematize and present a lot of things as her own that are really a plagiarism from another work, another person, another book. And then she's attacking dogma, right? So in the 19th century, you have the Industrial Revolution at its height. You have rationalism and the Enlightenment believing to bring forth utopia. You have socialistic movements. I mean, Marx is 19th century. So when we were talking about Marxism and, the social context in which workers are upset with wages, there's upheavals in Russia and other parts of Europe. Of course, that's going to come at the beginning of the 20th century in regards to the Bolshevik Revolution. But all these ideas are being formulated and evangelized during the 19th century. And so you have this very difficult spot that Christianity finds itself in because it's asking for a dogmatic traditional worldview. Meanwhile, science and the Industrial Revolution and the globalizing world is telling everybody, hey, give up on all the traditional Christianity stuff. We're moving into the new age. a la Alice Bailey and the Aquarian Age, which, some New Agers think that we're in. Again, the age of spiritual insight, the Aquarian Age. But that was Theosophy, right? We're going to evolve into higher spiritual beings. It's the New Age. And so she attacked dogma. Well, that's going to find a lot of support in the West. You're telling me Western people can be perennial, they can be spiritual, they can still be scientific and rational, they don't have to abide by the church anymore because it's anti-dogmatic. And then she flattened the educated elite. She was critical of the institutions, which fair enough on that. But she offered meaning without submission. That's always going to find an audience. Wait, I don't have to submit to a God. I don't have to submit to Jesus Christ. I don't have to submit to a tradition. I can just believe things and call myself spiritual and then have unique experiences doing a wide variety of different stuff. Oh, okay. And so what she did, she built a post-Christian sacred canopy. I've talked to you guys about the sacred canopy over and over. Peter Berger, 20th century sociologist, Protestant Christian. So the sacred canopy is the canopy that unites people, right? We've talked about how the American sacred canopy is split. There is nothing that unites all Americans anymore. You have like conservative Americans, which is kind of like an Americana canopy that still holds. You have a progressive canopy. You have all types that we don't have a unified nation anymore. But what she did is she created a unified spiritual perspective and paradigm for a post-Christian world. And this, so in turn, was initially for the industrial age, but it finds even better footing in the digital age. And the digital age is the age that we're in. And this is why her influence persists today. So that's my little opening spiel on Blavatsky and why I think many people are just not aware of how influential she truly was to the modern world. So thank you all for that. Smash that like. NGM Studies throws in 20, says, love these framework deep dives. Well, thank you so much, MGM Studies. Really appreciate the support. God bless you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Varango's Pod throws in 10, says, helping you get to the goal, but exclude me from the prize since as of yesterday, I already have your autographed book. Well, glory to God, brother. Thank you so much for supporting the work and buying a copy. So I was just able to catch up and get all the ones that people just purchased out into the mail. So if you recently purchased, you should be receiving yours if you didn't already. But if we reach today's 30 Super Chat goal, I have 2 copies of Return to Babylon that I will gift to 2 separate Super Chatters. So one will, 2 books, 1 Super Chatter gets a book, but 2 different Super Chatters will get a book today if we reach the 30 Super Chat goal. So keep that in mind. Varangos throws in 5, says, if everything is true, then nothing is true. Exactly. And one of the things I saw about the Theosophical headquarters in India is said, what was it? That no religion is above the truth. It was like a huge display on one of the walls. No religion is above the truth. This whole idea, you shouldn't belong to a religion. You should just take the true things of each religion and believe those. It's like, well, how do you know which one's true? How do you know that reincarnation is real? Now, of course, we do know that she experimented with peyote, or at least it's alleged. It's alleged that she experimented with peyote based on people that knew her. We don't know that for a fact, but I believe it's the case. We do know for a fact that Blavatsky smoked cannabis, hashish, and opium and drank laudanum. Towards the end of her life, she had a lot of physical pain. And so opium and laudanum is basically opium plus alcohol. It's like 10%. Is it 10% alcohol? I forget what the mixture is, but laudanum is drinkable opium basically. And so she did, this is before, the psychedelic revolution of the 1960s. We're talking, like 1870s. That, yeah, she was smoking hash, and she was a notorious tobacco smoker, right? Her personality, from what I was researching for today, and this topic took me multiple days to do because I wanted to know everything I could about Blavatsky. And according to multiple people, she was really vulgar. Like, she would cuss your ass out in a heartbeat. She was very quick to anger. I saw some people, now this is undiagnosed, but some people, based on the descriptions of her behaviors and her actions, she was very much manipulative. She would bend truths or create or just outright lie if it benefited her in certain ways. This was noted by people that were close to her that was actually supporting and went along with lies for a certain period, and then later came out and said it was a lie, it wasn't real, or Blavatsky wrote that, it was a forgery. And so some people have argued that she was like an undiagnosed narcissist. But you got to, again, think about this. This is the 19th century. This is a woman. I couldn't find any instance of her ever having a romantic relationship, which is like, is that not weird? I was weird because there's theories, was Blavatsky a lesbian? Because she was kind of a butch, masculine, domineering woman in the 19th century before, that expression of self was more culturally normalized as it is today. But no, she was just like super anti-traditional marriage, anti-traditional ways of life. And some people thought that she was a narcissist because she was so focused on her own aims. I do believe that she sort of believed in what she was promoting, because it doesn't make sense that she would go through the amount of effort she went through to write her books and build her stuff and go to the different parts of the world. I think that she probably believed it. I think obviously she knew that she forged stuff. She knew that she lied about things. I think that's the case too. Both can be true. She lied and forged documents, and at the same time, she also believed in the general framework of everything that she was putting forth. And so for her, it was a necessary utility. Tell a little bit of a lie. Maybe more people will get into Theosophy, it'll make it more convincing, and then they can find their higher selves and they can go on their own journey and move towards, spiritual evolution and transcendence of something like that. So I do believe that to be the case. Kabangja throws in 2. More ortho thugs on JRE. The world needs it. Absolutely, man. I would love to get it. That's why I'm going to have to start putting out all the stuff that Joe Rogan's into. I'm going to start putting out more videos on psychedelics, New Age, alternative history. I got to figure out, I got to get something. I got to get something together. How else can I get on there? So, no, congratulations to Andrew, man. I'm really excited to spend time with him this weekend, and that's a really, really cool achievement. Really cool achievement, man. I've known Andrew before the Crucible took off. So I haven't known Andrew super duper long, but I knew Rachel before I knew Andrew. And I had done some streams with Rachel, and she's like, oh, you got to meet my husband. And then he started the Crucible, and that was a debate channel. I mean, it still is, but he does more his own stuff now. But at the beginning, he was hosting debates. And he had Pedro was a co-host there, Zen Shapiro. And I think the Crucible had like 1,000 subscribers, like the first time I met Andrew. And I've said this before. He told me what his plan was. I remember the first time going to his house, and I don't remember how big the Crucible was. It wasn't big. It wasn't that big yet. And I remember driving up there and hanging out with him and Rachel. And he told me what his plan was and how he was going to blow it up, how he was going to be, doing the debate scene and going super hard. And he was creating a team to help him build all this stuff. And to see what he's done, it's pretty impressive, man. Pretty impressive. So congratulations to Andrew. As his friend, I'm inspired by what he's done and his hard work. So I look forward to seeing him this weekend and catching up with him and telling him how I feel. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Snagglebeast, been a Occultic crew member for 23 months. Thank you so much, brother. He says, God bless, Dr. DPH. Can't wait to meet you again, at least by Montanica, now that I'm a full member of the church. Hyped to see you in the lineup. Well, glory to God, Snagglebeast. Josiah actually told me that he was in the Hoosier State for your baptism. So, congratulations, Snagglebeast. Welcome to the church. Welcome home, and welcome to the arena. So But hey, it will be fun to see you in Montanica, man. I'm looking forward to getting back out there this year. So I will be at Montanica for 2026. Ed Peters throws in 5, no comment. Thank you so much, Ed. God bless you. Alter Void throws in 5, says, sounds like she was flown out and maybe blown out. Just saying, yeah. She definitely did. In fact, regarding that, let me read a quote. So I wrote a paper during a course during my PhD that I titled Tracing Technologies of Transcendence. And I was using Mircea Eliade, who has his famous book on shamanism, Techniques of Ecstasy. So it's probably, I'm not saying it's the best book on shamanism, but it's probably the most famous work on shamanism, the Romanian religious studies scholar Mircea Eliade. And I was writing this paper, and I had a section actually about Blavatsky. So the whole paper was tracing the utilization of psychoactive substances from antiquity into the 21st century. That was the goal of the paper. I stopped it at the 20th century, turned it in, passed, got all my stuff, and I've never revisited it, although I could update it, reform it, and maybe put it as a book, like the history of psychedelics or something like that. But here's one of the quotes I had a deep dive and found regarding Blavatsky. Okay, so she, like I said, was known to use marijuana or cannabis, hashish, opium, laudanum, these types of things. But here's what I wrote is she also had these experiences under Dr. Edward Sutton Smith in New York. According to Rawson, a friend of Blavatsky at the time, somebody who was very close with her and was traveling with her, she told Dr. Sutton, meaning Blavatsky, told Dr. Sutton during one of these experiences that, again, could they have been using nitrous oxide? That was huge during the 19th century, right? Like William James, the American pragmatist, Varieties of Religious Experience, that's his famous book on religion. He did nitrous oxide. Kind of got an altered state, believed that religion was all tied with these mystical experiences. And this is why so many psychonauts believe that psychedelics are the origin of religion, right? That type of thing. But Blavatsky, I have a quote. She told the doctor that hashish multiplies one's life 1,000-fold. My experiences are as real as if they were ordinary events in my actual life. I have the explanation. It is a recollection of my former existences. Remember what we just talked about with the karma trauma stuff that these New Age girls do? This is literally Blavatsky. Oh, hashish multiplies my life by 1,000 times. Oh, I know what it is. It allows me to recall and remember my previous existences, my previous incarnations. It is a wonderful drug, and it clears up a profound mystery, unquote. So that is a reference to, so you're asking, was she blown out? Was she mentally fried? Was she flying? Was she high? Sometimes yes. Sometimes yes. Ethan Dannon throws in 5, says, if information is not transformation, why does Christ speak of the sower sowing the word as something transformative for the soil? The word transforms the soil. I think you've misunderstood that parable. So information is not transformation. That is a Gnostic presupposition that the more you know, the closer you are transformed to Christ. We as Orthodox and the majority history of Christianity believes that how intelligent you are or how much you know has nothing to do with how similar you are to Christ. It has to do with your virtue. It has to do with your morality. It has to do with your piety. It has to do with your repentant heart. This is where all of us are equal. Not all of us have the same mental facility, the same mental capacity, but all of us are able to make the right or wrong decision regarding any certain circumstance. So that is how we become like Christ. That's how we're transformed into Christ. We're transformed into a Christ-like entity through the embodiment of the uncreated energies. That means it's a mystical participation with God. That has nothing to do with secret knowledge. And so when Christ is talking about the sower in the seed, he's talking about sharing the word with someone who's receptive. that is not the same thing as thinking that information is transformation. Obviously, we have to communicate. If you're saying that what me by denouncing information as transformation means that we can't speak to each other, like, no. Obviously, you have to communicate. Obviously, if somebody doesn't know something, you have to share insight. That doesn't mean that they have to get more and more and more and more insight to get closer and closer to Christ. That is a Gnostic presupposition. That is not traditional Christianity. So I appreciate the question, Ethan, but I think we may have a different interpretation on the sower parable. Mr. Fist throws in 5, says, she sounds like Dostoevsky's evil / subtarted twin. That's a good one. I didn't think about that. Thank you, Mr. Fist. Darth Grumpy Dad 76125 throws in 5, says, with just the basic philosophy I've learned from Jay, you, and Jim Bob, every time I hear these weirdos, it blows my mind how they stay in the mainstream. Well, I appreciate that, Darth Grumpy Dad. I will say that most people don't study philosophy. If you are interested, if you watch streams like this, and you're able to actually comprehend and follow and connect dots and participate in the actual conversation at hand, you are a minority in the world. Let's just be honest here, okay? The things that we're doing on these YouTube channels, whether it be myself or Jim Bob or Jay, if you are actually understanding the arguments, you are a minority, not in just the world, definitely in the world, but a minority in the United States. Most people have no interest in this stuff. So, because they have no philosophical grounding, they can fall for anything. I mean, that's why I agree with you. You learn about Theosophy, you learn about all these and we haven't even gone through on some of the other stuff. We're going to go into even deeper here in just a few. But you learn about it, and you're like, oh my God, how does anybody believe this? But assuming you don't have all that philosophical jargon and framework to bat something against, it's a pretty compelling story. It's a compelling narrative, right? This idea that there's ascended masters, that this woman in the 19th century was given information that nobody in the entirety of world history was able to possess. And then she wrote it down. And when she wrote it down, it deconstructed materialism and the dogmatic Christianity of Europe. And in place, it presented all the world religions as having a shared unified truth. And that's what Theosophy is. And if you understand this, you understand the teaching of God. You understand the primordial ancient wisdom. And then there's cosmic entities. There's reincarnation. There's higher selves. There's spiritual evolution. I mean, it's an interesting story. And that's why so many women fall into it. Women, unlike us, Darth Grumpy Dad, they're not going to analyze this stuff logically and rationally or through a critical philosophical lens. They're going to go with the story. And so really Theosophy is about the compellingness of the myth. That's where the gold is. Because when you actually start to try to kick the tires, the whole car falls apart. The forgeries regarding some of these secret doctrines or secret letters, like Blavatsky claimed that these ascended masters would write her a letter and it would just begin to manifest itself physically. It would, like you're sitting at a desk, there's nothing there, and all of a sudden slowly, a faint hint of a letter begins to emerge until it's fully physically there. And then she'd open it and it would be a letter from one of the ascended masters. Well, turns out we know that those were forgeries because one of the women, I forget her name, that was working with Blavatsky, they had a huge falling out, and she went and she went to the Society of Psychic Research and said, hey, those letters, I was with Blavatsky, she wrote those. So they're forges. A lot of it was plagiarized. But that's not really the point. Now for us, that's the point, because what we're asking is it true or not? Is this real? Is it true? But for most people, that's really not the question. The question is, wow, that's fascinating. That's a great story. That makes sense. I'm compelled by that narrative. I got to learn more about this. And then by learning more about it, because they don't have the categories to analyze it correctly, they view themselves as being a special boy. And everybody wants to be special. You want to be a special girl or a special boy. That's every New Ager that exists. Vigo throws in 5, says, many thanks, Dr. DPH. God bless you and yours. Thank you very much, Vigo. MGM Studies throws in 10, says, those witch talk vids with Rachel are gold. Those people in TikTok were bonkers. Yeah, they absolutely are. Four Lever throws in 5, says, God bless you. Thank you very much. Do appreciate it. Whitney's Barbecue throws in 10, says, for the goal, keep up the good work. Well, oh, that's Whitey's Barbecue. Thank you very much, Whitey's Barbecue. Do appreciate the support. Blue Skittle, shout out to you, brother. Kodo Crew member for 26 months, says, so crazy how everyone was such important people in their previous lives every time. I know, right? Yeah, everyone you talk to that believes that they know their previous life, they were, I was actually the emperor of Rome. Have you heard of Marcus Aurelius? That was actually me. I had a dream, and my wife also cheated on me, and I was wearing white linen. I'm pretty sure I was Marcus Aurelius. Shout out to Matt Scroggins. Throws in $10 over on the Streamlabs. Says, sending this over to a buddy who needs to hear this now. Thanks so much, DPH. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Do appreciate it. Okay. Now, with all that being said, what I want to do now is dive into my video here on Blavatsky, and we're going to watch about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to stop it once he kind of introduces Blavatsky, and then I'm going to go a little bit over my document. Now, guys, my document, if you want access to my study guide, okay, my study guides are always available. In fact, we should just do that real quick. Why don't we do some quick housekeeping real quick? So quick housekeeping. If you want to get access to my study guide, you're going to see it here in a few. It's 25 pages of everything you need to know about Blavatsky and Theosophy. You can go sign up over at the Logos Academy. I'm going to share that link right now. Go sign up at the Logos Academy. You can get access to all my study guides that I've ever made. They're on a playlist. You can watch the live streams. You can download them. You just go right over here, go to Classroom. Of course, you can rewatch. We've done 3 classes on the Orthodox Survival course, and we'll be doing a 4th class on Chapter 5 next Wednesday, a week from today. So if you want to be part of our men's meetings where we're actually reading through the Orthodox Survival course, and I would say it's a Orthodox Survival course 2.0, because what I'm doing is giving even more historical context and framework for everything that Father Seraphim Rose is talking about. Sign up over at the Logos Academy. Would love to have you. Again, a major thank you to Michael for sponsoring today's stream. Thank you so much, Michael. Do appreciate the topic today. It was a great topic. Can't believe I haven't done a full stream on Blavatsky yet. But if you too have a stream that you would like to sponsor and for me to dive into, you can go over to davidpatrickcarey.com, do a premium video sponsorship, and I'll reach out to you and we can figure out what the topic is. Also, if you'd like to get a signed copy of my book, you can do so right here. Would love to write any message your heart desires. If you'd like to get it a little bit cheaper, you can do so right over here on Amazon. Just search Return to Babylon from Adam to Antichrist. And if you get it from Amazon, please do me a favor and leave me a review. Please give me a 5-star review. And if you're able to, leave a comment. That is huge for the Amazon algorithm to get the book out there so more people will purchase it. So a little bit cheaper over on Amazon. If you're interested in any peptides, go use promo code CODAL over at Level Up Health. These are very high quality peptides. I'm using BPC 157 right now. It's actually this one right here, the 1000 MCGs BPC 157. Big fan. But if you would like to see more about the different peptides they have available, nootropic stuff, longevity stuff, BPCs for repairing the gut and muscles and any sort of physical ailment you may have, it aids in that. It's why it's called the Wolverine drug. You can go use promo code COTEL, COTEL, and you'll get a discount. Also, you can use promo code COTEL, COTEL, over here at orthodoxdepot.com and get prayer ropes, crosses, incense, whatever it may be, and get a discount there as well. So check that out if you guys are interested. Okay, now I'm going to play about 5 minutes of this documentary. It's I'll tell you what, there's not a bunch of great documentaries out there on Theosophy and Blavatsky. I have done, let's see, I think I watched like 4 of these, and all of them are kind of boring. I would say this was probably one of the best ones. That's why I'm using it today for my stream, because I needed some type of visual content. I can't just read to you guys the whole time. Nobody likes that. So I was trying to find some type of visual educational tool I could use. This was the best one. So just to give him credit, this is coming from Hemorphia YouTube channel. He's got about 5,500 subscribers. This was a very popular video, over 250,000 K, 262 exactly. But just want to give him credit. He's the one that put this together. His channel is kind of like an esoteric channel. It's certainly not Christian, and he's certainly not Christian. He's not interested in promoting Christianity. But anyway, just giving him credit in case he wants to flag this in the future. I am giving you credit. But here we're going to watch like the first 5 minutes here where he's kind of introducing who Blavatsky is. And we're going to go through all the way up to where he then gets into ISIS Unveiled. We're going to stop the video there, go back to my document, and then I'm going to fill in more details on who Blavatsky is and what she was up to. Then we'll go in and we'll continue further. So check this out.
Established in New York City in 1875 by Russian Helena Blavatsky and 2 Americans, Henry Olcott and William Judge, along with 16 original members. This was a unique time in the world. The scientific revolution had greatly increased the knowledge of the natural world, but this had led to a backlash for more spiritual groups. The rise of industry and urbanization saw a breakdown of tradition as people were moving into new cities. As a response to all this uncertainty, the Theosophical Society would attempt to combine science, philosophy, and religion into one understanding of reality. Although there were 3 founders, the main philosophical force would come from Helena Blavatsky, who was a widely acclaimed mystic and occultist. Now there are some who have doubted Blavatsky's claims about her early life, and there are conflicting sources. But I'm going to attempt to best present what I think Blavatsky herself claimed, and you can judge for yourself if you believe her or not. Born to the aristocracy in Russia in 1831, she would flee from her first marriage at the age of 17 and begin to travel around the world, meeting with all sorts of people and studying many different esoteric topics. While in London in 1851, she would meet with who she originally thought was an Indian prince, India being ruled by many independent kingdoms with allegiance to the British crown at this time. Believing that she had known him since her childhood, he would ask her to help him complete a great mission for humanity. Blavatsky agreed and would be given a special task to visit Tibet. No easy...
Now, I don't want to interrupt too much. I just wanted to play the first 5 minutes. But I do have to just reiterate, this is coming from someone who is more sympathetic to Blavatsky. There is no, again, and I double-checked, I triple-checked, I used AI, I try to find articles. There is no evidence that Blavatsky ever actually made it to Tibet. And so this whole encounter with this Indian prince and him saying that he's going to, provide entrance to the ascended master so you can be initiated into all these mysteries, probably never happened. This is probably totally fictitious. Now, if you are a Theosophist, this is their dogma, right? This is their dogma. This is Blavatsky's claim to fame. She was initiated into the mysteries that no one else in history had access to, that this has to be the case. But if you're a skeptic like myself and you really dive into it, there's just no evidence. And there's been multiple scholars in recent years trying to decipher whether that's the case or not, and sympathetic to Blavatsky, actually trying to prove that she did go to Tibet or find the Zion book. Book doesn't exist. Language never existed. No evidence. And it's very, very unlikely, even if she tried to get in Tibet. Tibet was totally... not isolated. They did allow some people to come in, but it was super hardcore in the 19th century. They didn't let people there, and especially a woman. So that's why, unless she did meet these eternal ascended masters That's about the only way that she would be able to get into Tibet. Like, they had roads, like every road into was blocked. You had to show papers. You had to have physical documentation. It's just incredibly, incredibly unlikely, even if she wanted to get to Tibet, that she could have. Just want to throw that out there in case anybody gets confused. But he's presenting the story as Theosophy tells it.
Defeat, as at this time Tibet was closed to outsiders. She would refer to this man as Master Moria, but she would be turned away from her first visit to Tibet by the British. She would return years later and successfully enter the region in 1855, although soon after she would become lost and have to retreat from the region. After this, she would return to her family in Russia and spend the next several years working to refine and gain mastery over her psychic abilities. In 1867, while traveling outside of Russia, she would receive a message from Master Moria to join him in Constantinople. From there, they, along with an additional master known as Kutumi, would finally journey to Tibet. While in Tibet...
Isn't it funny how her ascended masters look like Jesus? Right? I just found that hilarious. The whole thing about Theosophy is that it's the spiritual in religion that's going to replace Christianity and Western materialism, right? This is the perennial philosophy, spirituality that's going to unite all aspects of society. And then the two ascended masters, which again didn't exist, but she claims to have met and initiate her into these esoteric secret doctrines. They both look like Jesus. It's like, come on. Come on. If they're in Tibet, at least make them look Tibetan. They look like Christ.
Blavatsky claimed that she was taught Sinzar, a type of ancient Sanskrit which had been preserved in the mountain monasteries. This would allow her to read the Book of Jian, an ancient Tibetan text that was the records of a people now lost to time. This would go on to serve as the basis for her own books. While there, the masters would also help her to develop further psychic powers, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, astral projection, the dematerialization and rematerialization of objects, and even the power to control someone's mind.
So, are you hearing this? These ascended masters gave her these spiritual abilities to read minds, use telepathy, make things disappear and appear. Just like the ascended masters apparently would send her letters, like I said, and they would just magically appear right before her and her fellow theosophists, proving the magical capabilities of these enlightened men. Give me a break.
She would leave Tibet in 1870 before finally arriving in New York City in 1873, 2 years before the founding of the Theosophical Society. In regards to the Book of Jian, Theosophist Charles Leadbeater, who you may remember from the video on human aura, would later remark, "It appears to be very highly magnetized, for as soon as a man takes a page into his hand, he sees passing before his eyes a vision of the events which it is intended to portray, while at the same time he seems to hear a sort of rhythmic description of them in his own language, so far as that language will convey the ideas involved."
Wow. So if you just hold the Zion, it's like the Pentecost, that, you know, this Sazerain language that has no evidence to ever exist. You don't have to be able to read it. You just hold the book, and if you just touch a page, just touch it with your little bitty little finger, just touch, and it just transcribes, just downloads right into your brain like a rhythmic description. And it'll come to you in your own language, as long as your language has the vocabulary to describe these secrets. I mean, if you got one of these primitive languages, it might not work. You have to have a very sophisticated language to describe the theosophical cosmology.
Its pages contain no words whatever, nothing but symbols. As for the other founding members, Henry Olcott was a former colonel who had fought in the American Civil War, as well as a prominent lawyer, journalist, and Freemason. He was even appointed to a special commission assigned to investigate the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. He had tried to start a similar organization years earlier, though it failed to gain traction. William Judge was also a lawyer, but much less is known about him before the founding of the society. Their three official goals were to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color.
So as I mentioned, that is essentially the mission statement of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. Only difference is the Rosicrucian Brotherhood believed that Christianity was, they had a perennialism, but they sort of believed that Christianity was like the top of the perennial pyramid. It's like the truest of all the religions, but they all have their own truths. And so what she's doing is basically the same mission statement as the Rosicrucians, which after the 30 Years' War, the Rosicrucians are, as a true movement in Europe, a true intellectual movement vying for political power, basically decimated. And that's why then modern science divorces itself from all of the spiritual hermeticism, alchemy, magic, esoteric. It divorces itself from all that stuff to create modern science. But because it did away with all the, the mission of the universal brotherhood and the secret esoteric message for humanity that Rosicrucian, Theosophy fills in the void 200 years later. It really is like 200 years later. I mean, it's a little bit more, but now Theosophy is going to fulfill what the Rosicrucian Brotherhood couldn't do. But instead of Christianity being at the top of the perennial pyramid, if you will, she flattens it, right? This is about humanity without distinction, Neoplatonism, unity over multiplicity, right? Race, creed, sex, caste, or color. So it's kind of a progressive development upon what the Rosicrucians wanted.
To encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science. And
so therefore, again, these are Enlightenment values, right? The study of something to know what it is. Well, if you want to know what Orthodox Christianity is, you have to be an Orthodox Christian, right? There's like a mystical veil. You could learn all about it. Doesn't mean you know what it is, because at the heart, it's a mystical experience. But the Enlightenment developed this idea. To know what something is, you have to study it. That's all you have to do. And so to know everything about religion, philosophy, and science, we just need to study it in a comparative way. So again, we see Rosicrucianism fulfillment. Then we see the Enlightenment dimension.
To investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity.
And then we see the sort of spiritualization of man in the modern period emerge, right? These latent spiritual powers. I mean, Blavatsky, she can make things levitate. She can make things appear and disappear. She can read your mind. She can implant thoughts in your head that she wants you to think. She just wants you to be able to develop these same powers that she has.
They would spread through the establishment of lodges similar to Freemasonry, and it wouldn't take long for lodges to open across the United States and Europe, with even prominent figures such as Thomas Edison joining. Despite their success, they would be
another reason to be a Tesla supremacist, right? Nikola Tesla was Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox. And in fact, there's a church in Serbia that has an icon of him. Now, he doesn't have a halo. He's not a saint in the church, but he is painted in iconographic form. And what we do know about Tesla is at the end, so we know that his family was incredibly religious. I think his grandfather was a priest, and he was raised in the church. When he left Serbia for his mission and research, he got to America. He kind of fell out of favor with religion, but we do know, based on correspondences he had with his mother towards the end of his life, like the last 2 years of his life before he died or was killed, more likely, he actually was talking about Christ in the church again. So Nikola Tesla died an Orthodox Christian. Then you got Thomas Edison with DC currents, DC versus AC, the whole battle between Tesla and Edison, electrocuting elephants in Times Square. He's a theosophist. So you got the theosophist Edison killing elephants in Times Square using DC currents because he doesn't want to lose money. And then you got Tesla over here actually utilizing free energy and is Orthodox. So you pick your team.
Opposed by many groups, not only by traditional institutions such as churches and universities, but also among other spiritualists. Blavatsky had a habit of insisting that only those with proper training could safely exert psychic powers, training that only she had. Naturally, this would anger other claimed psychics and cause them to distrust the society. In 1877, Blavatsky would publish Isis Unveiled.
Okay, we'll come back to Isis Unveiled. Okay, so that was the video kind of introduced Blavatsky. Now I want to fill in some dots, connect some, provide some more details here. And so who is Helena Blavatsky? Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. So as I said, she's not merely an occultist. She is basically a civilizational synthesizer. That's what makes her so profound, is she truly did synthesize East, West, occultism, religion, philosophy, science, all together really for the first time. That's what Theosophy, if there is something admirable, again, it's difficult to find that, but I guess the admirable characteristic is that it truly did attempt to, within the historical context that it was in, to provide something that was truly universal. But she did bring civilizations together for the first time in a unique way. Now, the British, they were already in India, but they certainly didn't view Buddhism, Jainism, or Hinduism as on par with the Church of England, for example. She really promotes this idea that she flattens the hierarchy of religion in the world. So collapse of traditional Christian metaphysics under higher biblical criticism. So 19th century, you're getting a lot of skeptical, critical biblical scholarship. This is the time of Darwin. So everything is being revamped and re-perceived in light of Darwinian evolutionary theory. And then the geological deep time. Oh my gosh, the earth is so much older than we thought it was, right? There's no way that God could create a planet that was already in a maturated state. Oh my God, no, if we used our geological devices to decipher the age of the planet, we figure there's deep time here. It's way older than we thought. That's where, again, this ascended master stuff, this theosophy, giving you the secrets of the deep time historical perspective on humanity and creation. This is the rise of positivism and materialism, Orientalist scholarship, and romantic reactions against Enlightenment rationalism. Her project was to replace Christianity, absorb modern science, claiming antiquity was superior to Judaism and Christianity. Those were the two. Now, she loved Kabbalah, but she hated Torah-driven Judaism. So if it was Orthodox Judaism and then anything remotely traditional Christian, she hated it. And so anything other than that was viewed superior. She truly believed that Judaism and Christianity were sort of machinations to lead people away from this ancient deep wisdom that she uncovered, providing a spiritual hierarchy without ecclesial authority. So she is a proto-New Age architect, but also a late modern Gnostic. So her biography, as it said, she grew up in an aristocratic family. She was not poor. Now, her mother, again, who she was named after, she died at a relatively early age. I think she was 10 or 11 when her mother died, who she spent most of her time with, because her father, Colonel Peter von Hahn, and their ancestry, I looked into what her ancestry, I was curious if she had any Jewish ancestry. I was just curious, just for stream purposes, right? Purely for academic purposes. I was just curious. And she was not. There is no evidence. What we do know for a fact is that she was part of one of the longest aristocratic lineages in Russia, and she was also part of an aristocratic German line. So she is both German and Russian, and she comes from aristocratic lineage on both sides. So this is not a peasant girl. When her mother dies, because her father is still in the military, it was customary at that time in Russia for the child to go live with the maternal parents. So her mom's parents, her grandparents, and that's who really raised her. But her family was really into the Russian Enlightenment thought. So part of the problem of the late Tsarist Empire in Russia, the 19th century, is that Russia was technologically and industrially behind the West. And so many of the aristocratic Russians were obsessed with the European Enlightenment. They were fully on board with what the Enlightenment stood for, and they wanted to incorporate that and bring that into Russia. So her father, even though he was culturally orthodox, from what I was reading, certainly wasn't a devout believer. Her mother certainly wasn't a devout believer. And her mother's parents definitely were not Christian. Not Christian at all. They were both very critical of the church. And that's why her grandfather, he's the one that had all this esoteric library and all these texts that she was able to read and look at from a very young age. So both of her grandparents were very much interested in the occult. I believe her grandfather and her dad were both Freemasons, and they were deeply involved in the European Romanticism. So Romanticism is it's almost a poetic philosophical reaction against the industry of the Enlightenment, against the rationalism of the Enlightenment, and looking for basically an authentic expression of the human person. That's what Romanticism is really about. You get romantic literature, you get romantic philosophy, a la Kierkegaard. He was part of the Romantic tradition. So she was exposed early to esoteric folklore, Masonic myth, alchemy and magic stories, and Enlightenment anti-clericalism. That's what she grew up in. So yes, she grows up in an Orthodox country, but she grows up, I put it, post-Orthodox, but pre-atheist. Orthodoxy exists as a culture, but there is no faith of Orthodoxy in her family. Now, one of the interesting points in her life, when she's 17 years old, she gets married to Nikifor Blavatsky. That's where she gets her last name, Blavatsky. She's no longer Han, which she was born as, her maiden name. She becomes Blavatsky, and he is twice her age. Okay, so she's 17, and upon marrying him, as soon as they basically get back to his house, within months, she runs away. She flees within months, and this marks total rejection of 19th century female norms. That's why she's butch, she's vulgar, she smokes like a chimney, she's constantly reading and writing, she's interested in building the Theosophical Society and advancing her work and knowledge base, and the emergence of Blavatsky's self-mythologizing persona. So what does she do? She begins to travel, right? And so I couldn't find a lot on Blavatsky's life from the moment she left the husband that, imagine him too. He marries the 17-year-old girl. He's twice her age. He's probably excited. She's coming from an aristocratic family, both German and Russian lineage. Within a month, she runs away, never sees her again. Again, can't say she was the prettiest thing in the world. But, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And she claimed initiations and travels. So from the period of 1849 to 1873, she claims that she is traveling around the world. She claims that she traveled to Tibet. She was initiated by secret Himalayan adepts, study in Egyptian mystery schools, which we do know that she went to Egypt. That is a fact. And then training in the occult sciences. She was initiated into all these different things. And then again, what I put as her academic reconstruction, what we do know is that she most likely did not go to Tibet. She traveled widely in Europe, the Middle East, and the Americas. No credible evidence of Tibetan initiation. Many Eastern doctrines derive from Orientalist texts, secondary translation. That's where the plagiarism comes in. She was just finding things translated, and then she would grab it and say it's her own. And then European occult reinterpretations, the esoteric traditions. Yet psychologically and symbolically, the master narrative becomes her source of authority. It replaces apostolic succession with hidden gnosis. And so founding of modern Theosophy, it gets founded in 1875 in New York. Now, why New York? Why would Theosophy and all of her travels, why would they wind up in New York? Well, to answer that question, I can't go into the full details today, but check out this book. This is a great book. It's called A Republic of Mind, Spirit and Cultural History of American Metaphysical Religion. This is by Catherine Albanese. I believe she's a Yale scholar. Anyway, she's a Western esoteric academic. I'm not here to promote whatever her personal beliefs are, but this book in particular is fantastic. Why? Because it demonstrates that esotericism, hermeticism, magic, folk myths, all this stuff is rooted in the actual DNA of America, basically. From the founding fathers forward, America is rooted within this sort of esoteric, mystical, magical, hermetic milieu. at the time. So most people aren't, we talk about the Puritans, we talk about Protestantism, but really undergirding all of that and why all those religions have gone in such weird directions is because America at its heart is really esoteric, hermetic, and Masonic. And that's what this book is about. So if you're interested in that topic, do check that book out. I highly recommend that book. It's a fantastic work. So, in that context, spiritual mediumship, the Fox sisters, the Eddy brothers that were supposed to be spirit channelers in Vermont. Blavatsky gets linked up with these guys. She goes up to Vermont. She sees what they're doing. Some people speculate that they taught her how to fake some of these psychic abilities, which the Society of Psychic Research was able to reduplicate, again, calling into question all these magical powers she had. But that's where she links up with Henry Steele Olcott, William Judge, both Americans. And the society functioned as a religious movement, an esoteric school, and a cultural reform project. Its public aims deeply hierarchical occult structure. Shift to India in anti-colonial context. From New York, they shift and move the headquarters of Theosophy to Adyar, India. And Theosophy positioned itself as a defender of true Hinduism. Now, what was going on at the time in India? The British were in India. And this is, Mahatma Gandhi was influenced by Theosophy. He was actually a big supporter of Blavatsky. Why? Because the Theosophical Institute was anti-colonial and aided many of these sort of dysfunctional pro-Indian nationalist groups. They would actually meet at the Theosophical headquarters. I think the board of like Indian independence or whatever the party was, I forget what it was, that their meeting to like join forces was at the Theosophical headquarters in Adyar, India. And so Theosophy goes back to India, and even though they're all white Western educated elite, they're telling the Indians, look, we're here for you guys. We're not like the British. We don't want your spices. In fact, we're not going to build your railways and your infrastructure. We want you guys to make sure you hold on to your Hinduism. And we're going to be here to be the defenders of true Hinduism. And so that led to them being very, very critical of any Christian missionaries in India, which some of the Indians were very fond of. They didn't want the Christians to missionize there anyways. And so they become an ally of Indian spiritual nationalism. And they are vocally anti-colonial. This is why Theosophy, by this time, almost a large swath of the people at that headquarters were actually Indian. Many, many Indians were converting to Theosophy. And this reshaped Western perceptions of Hinduism and Buddhism, often inaccurately, I put that, but it was powerful, very powerful. So what is the metaphysics and cosmology of all this stuff? And then we'll get into, I'm going to go back to the documentary and then we'll come back. The absolute, Neoplatonism, infinite, impersonal. There is no personal deity besides these ascended masters, which we all can become. Beyond being and non-being, so Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. Advaita Vedanta is the non-dualist theology of Hinduism, identical with the Neoplatonic one, Vedantic Brahman, Buddhist emptiness, all this stuff, again, just recapitulating this idea of the absolute, pure unity, the one, radical rejection of any personal God, creation ex nihilo, and divine will. These you're not going to find any of those three in the Theosophical worldview. And then what is their time? Ours is linear. There's a cyclical, eternal recurrence, right? There is no beginning and end. Everything just continues to flow. Endless cosmic breaths. No final judgment. Well, very convenient. No eschaton. There is no end point. This is anti-biblical at its core. Anthropology and root races. So she talked about these root races, as again, not exactly the way that we would understand races, not the way that Ariosophy, the ideology that influenced the Third Reich and Nazism, not the way that they understood races either, but these spiritual races. And so she identified all humanity as Aryan. And so early races were etheric. They really didn't have material bodies. You can kind of almost see through them. They're almost like translucent. Later races became more and more material. The current human race was the Aryan, and this is a transitional race where essentially we go down and then we hit the Aryans and then we start going up. We start ascending back to our etheric framework, our etheric anthropology, our spiritual entities. Future races will re-spiritualize humanity. Critical evaluation, it blends pseudoscience, myth, racial hierarchy, and later appropriated by occult racialism, a la Nazism and Ariosophy, esoteric nationalism, a la Ariosophy, Nazi mysticism, a la Ariosophy again, right? So you can't say that Nazism is theosophical or the Ariosophy of the Third Reich was theosophical. It is a branch it was inspired by, but it's actually very different than Theosophy itself, especially how they understood races and nations. Karma, reincarnation, salvation, karma, impersonal cosmic law. There's no mercy, no forgiveness, and this replaces God's divine judgment. Reincarnation, the soul just migrates endlessly and eternally, and you just get to continue to evolve into something higher and higher and higher. Moral improvements over lifetimes, and no resurrection of the body. You don't really need to worry about that. And then salvation equals gnosis and self-mastery. The Mahatmas, these are the ascended masters that she claims to have contacted. So Moria and Kuthumi, they function as invisible lawgivers, hidden prophets, esoteric magisterium. This creates absolute authority without accountability. Now, fraud, controversy, and critical assessment. I talked to you about the Society for Psychic Research. What did they conclude? I mean, this group was, there's actually a great book I have. It's written by a husband and wife. It's called The Irreducible Mind. It's a really fantastic book. And they talk a lot about the Society of Psychic Research because the irreducible mind is coming out of the human potential movement. Human potential movement, idea that we have all these latent supernatural capabilities. And so what the irreducible mind, it's a modern, secular, psychological, neuroscientific approach to supernatural phenomenon. And they mention the Society of Psychic Research quite a bit. Now, one of the interesting, this is a total caveat, total tangent point, but one of the interesting things in the Irreducible Mind book is that they talk about instances of people dying from voodoo dolls, right? This is the type of stuff that book gets into. And what they found is that there are instances of people dying from voodoo dolls. But what they found is that there is not a single instance of someone not believing in voodoo dolls. And let's say a Santeria priestess creates a voodoo doll and tries to harm you. There is no instance of that working on someone who doesn't believe in voodoo. But as they document, there are multiple examples of people who believe in voodoo, that voodoo dolls actually appear to do things to the physical body, which gets into placebo effects and all this different stuff. But that's what the book Irreducible Mind, check it out. I don't know how expensive it is. It's a big book. It's like this. But very interesting stuff. That's the kind of stuff it dives into. But anyways, what did the Society of Psychic Research find in 1885? So remember, Theosophical Society founded 1875. 10 years later, the Society of Psychic Research begins to look into Theosophy and Blavatsky specifically because they're getting all this testimony of people who witnessed her having supernatural abilities. So they do a year-long review of Blavatsky. And what are the conclusions they come to? That her letters from the Mahatmas, these ascended masters that just appeared out of nowhere, after analyzing her handwriting and analyzing the various letters, they concluded that multiple of these letters were written by Blavatsky herself because, one, they were plagiarized, and two, the handwriting's one-to-one. Others she didn't write, but they believe that she dictated to somebody to write. So they found that out of all these letters, many of them were written by Blavatsky. Some of them were not written by Blavatsky, but they believe that she directed or dictated them to be written. Regarding her supernatural capabilities, like her time with the Eddy brothers in Vermont, learning how to do, these famous channelers and their supernatural abilities. The psychic research deemed that it was a phenomenon that was totally staged. It was totally fraudulent, just like her letters. And then In response, they did a clinic and where one of the psychic researchers presented themselves to be a spirit channeler, got people to come and prove that they knew how to do this facade to make people believe that you have supernatural capabilities, psychic powers, all this different stuff. And so they concluded that this was a conscious deception, not just a deception because she was deceived herself. The Society of Psychic Research came to the conclusion that she was conscious of the deception, which obviously if she fabricated this stuff and staged it. Later scholars have softened the language because the Psychic Society, SPR, was not kind to Blavatsky. But no modern academic has totally rehabilitated any sort of factual reliability to her testimonies or her claims. It just doesn't exist. Does not exist. So the legacy and long-term influence, Blavatsky directly or indirectly shaped Anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner, Alice Bailey in Modern New Age, Jungian archetypal psychology, Western Buddhism and Hinduism, UFO religions, and contemporary esoteric feminism. So, all right. That was a little bit on who she is. Now let's go back to our video and hear more about what Theosophy is. And then we'll come back to the document here.
Claiming that she had written what she perceived through clairvoyance, the book will be published in 2 volumes, one titled The Infallibility of Modern Science, and the other Theology. Not surprisingly, the first would heavily criticize science for its materialism and rejection of more esoteric concepts. She argues that paranormal phenomena are a manifestation of an unknown natural law, and reprimands scientists for their dismissal of the phenomenon, advocating for an increase in their study. The second would criticize Christianity for what Blavatsky saw as the church changing the teachings of Jesus Christ. Going back to where Blavatsky had said she had met and trained under masters, in Isis Unveiled, there was the idea of spiritual masters, or sages, human beings who had reached a higher stage or experienced an inner awakening, and therefore have access to incredible abilities, such as healing or the awareness of astral realms. Above those beings is something known as the world teacher. While the masters work to help individuals develop spiritually, the world teacher's influence affects all of humanity. Along with those such as Buddha or Krishna, Blavatsky believed that Jesus Christ was one of these world teachers. Isis Unveiled laid the claim that the church had been corrupted and was actively removing Eastern mysticism influence. The book even extensively compares the biblical texts with the Hindu scripture, the Vedas, Buddhist teachings, and Near Eastern creation myths, attempting to draw parallels to further this point. She saw the Gnostics as the true inheritors of the teachings of Jesus Christ, and was hostile to the ecclesiastical power for wiping them out, especially the papacy and the Jesuits. She would touch on a lot of other esoteric ideas, introducing the concept of a universal knowledge that underlies all various religions and philosophies, that ancient civilizations had access to this higher knowledge that has since been lost in modern society, and the volumes are also full with ideas related to numerology, sacred geometry, the nature of the soul, the Kabbalah, Freemasonry, the astral body, spiritual development. These ideas really wouldn't be fully explored until her later works, as the main purpose of Isis Unveiled was to challenge conventional thought and open readers up to the mystic. Blavatsky described India as the source of this knowledge, saying in Volume 1, India holds the key to all religious systems, old and new. She was also very supportive of the Vedas, the Brahman, and of course, Buddhism. The society would become involved with Arya Samaj, a Hindu reform movement in India, unique in that it was the first organization in Hinduism to actively attempt to recruit new members and proselytize. Both Blavatsky and Occult would relocate to Bombay, India, moving the headquarters there in 1879. While there, they would become heavily associated with Buddhism, traveling to the Kala Caves, an ancient Buddhist site where Blavatsky believed the masters would meet. They would continue traveling to various monasteries and meeting with prominent monks before eventually converting to Buddhism the following year. Despite opposition from British rule, branches of Theosophy would spread across India, growing in power enough to purchase a large estate and begin combating the spread of Christianity. Occult would travel to Sri Lanka and work extensively to attempt to renew Buddhism in the region. Setting up numerous Theosophy-funded Buddhist schools, he would publish the Buddhist Catechism in 1881, which explained the doctrines of Buddhism and the life of the Buddha, which is still used today. Statues of him can be found in Sri Lanka, and the date of his death in 1907 is still remembered in many Buddhist centers and schools. Blavatsky would leave India in 1883 and spend the following years traveling around the world supporting various Theosophical Society branches. In London, she would meet with the Society for Cyclical Research and submit to a study of her abilities. However, while also in London, she would upset the president of the Theosophy Society branch there, leading to her leaving to start a competing group, a portent of things to come. The society would soon be damaged by the Kalam affair. A member of the society, Emma Kalam, was accused of appropriating funds for her own use, and when asked to leave, threatened to release letters that she claimed were written by Blavatsky, proving that her abilities were faked.
The irony, right? One, Theosophical Society in India, one of its main goals was to stop the spread of Christianity because Christian missionaries were actually converting people. Okay, interesting. Two, she goes to the Society of Psychical Research, the SPR, in London. Now, he's getting ready to present what their findings were. I already told you what they were. But then she upsets the president of the Theosophical Society in London. And it's why? Because she was vulgar, like she spoke her mind. She was very quick to be angry about something. And apparently they got into it regarding, I don't know if it was teachings or the running of the institute or something, but he wasn't fond of being spoken to by Blavatsky the way that she spoke to most other people. So then they have a bit of a falling out, and she then creates a rival group, which is this is the story of Theosophy, especially after she dies. I mean, especially after, 1912, I believe, is the beginning of Anthroposophy with Rudolf Steiner, and he develops that over a decade from 1902 to 1912. Really, once you get into the 20th century, the Theosophical Society is just continually fracturing. It's like Protestantism. It truly is. It's like a recapitulation of which is so ironic, right? Because she hated dogma, she hated clergy, she hated formality, she hated the sacraments. She grew up in Orthodox Russia, and then her Theosophical Society then, ends up evolving the same way that Protestantism has evolved and just begins to fracture one way or another. So that's why today there's like all these competing schools and institutes of the Theosophical Society. But then Emma Kalam, that was the name I couldn't remember earlier, she gets caught stealing money from the Theosophical Society. And then when they say, hey, give us the money back, she says, no, I got the letters from Blavatsky admitting that she wrote this stuff and proving that it's all fake. And I'm going to keep the money and I'm going to keep these letters. And they're like, no, you're not going to keep the money. So then eventually she lets the letters out.
The society refused to pay her demands, and the letters would be published in Europe, hurting the group there. By 1885, there were 121 different lodges, but 106 of them were either in India or the surrounding land. That same year, the Society of Cyclical Research would publish their report on Blavatsky, and it would be very critical. Not only did they accuse her of faking her paranormal powers, but went so far as to accuse her of being a spy for the Russian government, saying, "For our own part, we regard Blavatsky neither as a piece of hidden seers. For our own part, we regard Blavatsky neither as the mouthpiece of hidden seers, nor as a mere vulgar adventuress. We think that she has achieved a title to permanent remembrance as one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting imposters in history."
Isn't that funny? I mean, so in the SPR validated some of the spiritual stuff. So it's not like they were just anti anything spiritual. The whole goal of the society was to take, the modern enterprise of science and investigate the paranormal, essentially. And many of the people doing the investigation were themselves very much believers of the paranormal. Okay, so this isn't like a bunch of, Richard Dawkins investigating some religious group that already have like a built-in animosity. It wasn't that. But they were very serious about what they could prove and not prove or be repeatable by an individual multiple times. So I love this. Their quote for Blavatsky then is for our own part, we regard Blavatsky neither as the mouthpiece of hidden seers, meaning these ascended masters, these Mahatmas. I don't think so. She's clearly not the mouthpiece of some higher power, nor as a mere vulgar adventuress. She's not just some woman that just travels around the world either. What we believe that she is that she has achieved a title to permanent remembrance as one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting imposters in history.
This would expectedly cause issues, both within and without the society, with even high-ranking members leaving the group. Blavatsky and her supporters would fight back against these claims, saying that the SPR had a predetermined goal of disproving her. Nearly 100 years later, they would be vindicated when the SPR retracted their report in 1986.
Now, they rescinded their report because another investigator wanted to reopen the case because he claimed that the other group was biased, right? But what ended up coming back is no official statement about Blavatsky. So it's like this guy apparently was upset about what they said about her. He claimed that their investigation was errant. And so they reopen a new investigation, but they don't come to any ultimate conclusions like the first one did. However, to my point that I put in the study guide is no academic. So if the SPR was totally, full of it, then some academic would have come along and actually done some work to try to re-justify her claims of paranormal ability, of these Mahatma letters, of the Ascended Masters, the Zion book. Nope. Nobody. No modern academic has actually been able to do that.
Agreeing that the original researcher did not properly study Blavatsky's claims. After receiving complaints from members in the London Lodge regarding their president, Blavatsky would move there and start a rival lodge to poach members, even going so far as to receive visits from both the poet W.B. Yeats and Mahatma Gandhi. In 1888, she would publish her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. While Isis Unveiled was more of an attack at the traditional institutes, The Secret Doctrine was intended to be a much more systematic, doctrinal work that would formalize the beliefs of Theosophy. Also published in 2 volumes, the first titled Cosmogenesis and the second Anthropogenesis. In the preamble, she claimed to have received these ideas from the Book of Gian, the ancient mystical book that she had learned Sinzar to read all those years ago. She would even write, "The secret doctrine is the essence of all doctrines, the root of all religions and philosophies. The ancient Book of Gian, from which its teachings are drawn, are the oldest record of the human race." The prologue also introduced a few concepts that are needed for the rest of the book, mainly 3 fundamental propositions. That ultimate reality, also known as the Parabaham, is beyond thought or description, even unknowable to the highest of beings. That time, the universe, and everything in it operates in cycles, and that each and every soul undergoes spiritual evolution over the eons, evolving through stages. The book has a very unique structure. Each chapter starts with a stanza.
MGM Studies, he makes a really good point here. He says, cosmogenesis is weird. She starts talking about the primordial egg. That comes from Gnostic cosmology. Like if you've ever seen depictions of like Abraxas, a sort of Gnostic god, he'll be like wrapped around an egg. And the idea is it's the cosmic egg. And the egg was used in some of these Gnostic cults to symbolize the universe itself. So that's where she's getting that. That's what I mean. Is like she's just taking ancient Gnosticism and then she's putting her 19th century veneer on it and saying, this is my idea.
From the Book of Gian, with the rest of the chapter being a commentary on that stanza. Cosmogenesis is focused on the universe, and the volume would go into how originally only darkness existed, the ultimate reality in a state of sleep, where everything was one undifferentiated being. The great breath, an active motion, would stir this infinite possibility and this would awaken space, or the root substance, where all future worlds would come from. The absolute would differentiate itself into spirit and matter, two sides of one reality. Here you also have the mohat, or the cosmic mind. This led to the appearance of the fohat, a type of cosmic animating force that forms a bridge between spirit and matter. It not only animates, but organizes the primordial substance, connecting celestial bodies and forming atoms. The Dhyan Shohans, or Lords of Meditation, would appear, beings of light serving as cosmic architects. This is also a somewhat generic term that can be applied to many celestial beings, although they exist within their own hierarchy. They would labor from higher dimensions using meditation to guide creation. Remember that this process is cyclical. In the same way a breath out creates a descent into matter, a breath in causes an ascent into spirit. There is no beginning of time, nor a personal God that we may think of in the classical sense. The Fohat and the Dhyan Shohans build the universe through karmic laws. The creation that occurs is also not random, but guided and organized. And the mind, or consciousness, is the cause of matter, not produced by it. Also, the Fohat being in every atom.
Isn't that convenient that the mind is behind matter? So everything that's occurring in the universe has a sort of cosmic mind behind it. But the mind, if even the highest ascended master, cannot understand ultimate reality, cannot understand space and time. It is what he just talked about is beyond conception itself. So it's like, so the cosmic mind doesn't even know space and time or the origins of the, I mean, what the cosmic mind and our minds, and all mind is behind physical matter, but then space and time, which is required for physical matter and experience to exist, the cosmic mind can't conceptualize or what? Huh? It
means that nothing can truly be said to be unalive. The four elements, earth, wind, fire, and air, are even thought to be inhabited by intelligent elemental entities. As the universe was formed, it would settle into 7 levels of...
Yeah, great point. Shout out to Patristic Faith and our favorite Deacon Doctor, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias in the house. He said it's a non-personal idealism. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a non-personal idealism.
Reality, going from the atomic or divine plane all the way back to the root plane, with things like spirits existing on the astral plane, thoughts on the mental plane, and matter on the physical plane. The planets are formed, starting out as astral states before appearing as physical bodies, with the Earth going through 7 cycles of spiritual and physical evolution, growing denser, larger, and more spiritual each time. The second volume, Anthropogenesis, deals much more with humans. The book describes how there are 7 root races, not races as different ethnicities that we may think of today, but more like different species in the stages of evolution. The first race is almost immaterial, gradually becoming denser, similar to the way the Earth did, with an astral race preceding a physical one. They would divide like single-cell life through mitosis, still without a sense of individuality and an almost plant-like level of consciousness. Once the Earth became physical, the second root race emerged, named the Hyperborean race as they lived around the...
Hyperboreans is what he meant. The Hyperborean race is the second race.
North Pole. They weren't quite fully physical, but had started to grow fluidic bodies. Instead of mitosis, they reproduced by sprouting offspring like branches from a tree. They also had a greater degree of consciousness, having a will to live. The Lemurian race finally saw man become fully physical, but in a giant, grotesque way, with misshapen proportions. They lived on the continent of Lemuria, and it was here that sexual reproduction first evolved. During this race, a group of celestial beings would first descend. These were higher, spiritual creatures, and through their influence, humanity would develop to full consciousness, free will, and self-awareness. Blavatsky reinterpreted the story of Adam and Eve, linking it to this event, with the fall of man now being a separation from the divine consciousness into physical matter.
So you see how she would repackage everything biblical. She had a sort of symbolic, archetypal exegesis for. So the fall is the separation from spirit into matter, right? That's what the fall is. That's what the descent is. It has nothing to do with objective morality or a personal God or the genesis of creation itself. No. This is all about this spiritual evolution being documented through religion.
The celestial beings were even said to come from Venus, which is linked to the morning star. The race ended as the continent of Lemuria was destroyed through cataclysm. The Atlantean race was next. They were very human-like in form, but psychically powerful, able to use telepathy and clairvoyance. As you would expect, they lived in Atlantis, a continent somewhere in the Atlantic. Here they would build massive cities and great weapons, using their knowledge of occult science and cosmic laws. This is also where the appearance of the Masters, or the Mahatmas, would first occur, as was mentioned back in Isis Unveiled.
Okay, so now let's go back and learn a little bit more details about what Theosophy is. And I'll try to make it a little bit quicker as we move through. So what Theosophy claims to be, its self-definition that Blavatsky presents Theosophy as not a new sect, but a divine wisdom, divine knowledge, or science, a perennial wisdom religion, as we already talked about. So the society's canonical objects frame Theosophy as universal brotherhood, comparative study, investigation. We already covered that as well. The metaphysical paradigm is ultimate reality, the absolute over personal God, cosmos, emanation, correspondence, and hidden hierarchies a la Neoplatonism. Again, this is really just Neoplatonism repackaged through Gnostic, Western esoteric, and Eastern mysticism. Anthropology, the true self is layered personhood. We talked about how this influences modern spirituality today. If you ever hear someone talking about their true self or their higher self, this comes from the influence of Blavatsky. Soteriology is that there is no eschaton. So soteriology is all about evolution, and she then fills judgment, God's judgment, objective morality with just reincarnation. You don't have to worry about mercy. You don't have to worry about forgiveness, repentance, objective morality. No, you just ascend through knowledge, and what you don't catch in this life, you'll catch in the next life. So soteriology becomes evolution, karma, reincarnation, and then reinitiation, essentially, because you're doing it over multiple lifetimes. And then time is cyclical history over linear salvation history. As we've talked about from a Christian perspective, there's always a beginning, a middle, and end to everything. There's nothing that you can observe that doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Your life, the life of the tree outside, every story, every movie, every poem, every book, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's only the ancient world, like the ancient Greek philosophers, that still believed in this cyclical understanding, this eternal materialism. And so she's then just repackaging materialism as the other side of the dialectic of consciousness. Really, they're actually part of the same thing. And this is just an eternal cyclical event that will continue on forever and ever. There is no beginning, middle, and end. And so why does Theosophy matter now? Well, it's led to the fracturing into all these different independent theosophical groups, but it is the foundation of the New Age. Encyclopedia Britannica explicitly links the rise of international New Age movement to independent theosophical groups, especially through non-theosophical developments. So the transferable modules, as I said, is all religions share a hidden truth. Karma is moral physics. Reincarnation as identity, story, and moral explanation. Spiritual evolution, consciousness expansion. Esoteric authority, hidden teachers, initiates, secret histories. Therapeutic metaphysics, it's inner divinity, it's higher self, it's transformation, it's figuring out who you really are. Because really you're a Mahatma, you're an ascended master. You just need to learn Blavatsky's theosophical techniques, and then you'll know. Modern identity, spirituality. So, Theosophy, this was important. I said, is a late modern epistemology. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a scholar, Olav Hammer. His work is frequently summarized as showing how modern esoteric currents from Theosophy onward, so any of these Western esoteric traditions, legitimate knowledge via a blend of traditional claims or tradition claims, meaning for her, the tradition is the Mahatmas. It's the ascended masters, that she has the true tradition that no one ever has because she was initiated. Then quasi-scientific idioms. She repackages all this stuff in a 19th century veneer of science, philosophy, and theology. And then experiential authority. Right? You have to do the things. I've done them. I've traveled to Tibet. Well, no, actually she didn't. I traveled to Constantinople. I traveled to Egypt. And so it's through these three frameworks that they decide something to actually be true knowledge. And that is what I called a late modern epistemology. And so world religions, doctrines, theosophy absorbs and repackages Hindu and Buddhist concepts, karma, rebirth, subtle bodies, planes, yogic meditative powers, the Neoplatonic and Hermetic themes, emanation, graded being, initiatory ascent, Gnostic, saving knowledge, hidden meaning, spiritual elite, and then the Kabbalistic symbolic readings as scripture as encoded esotericism, meaning every single religious text, be it the Bible, be it the Quran, be it the Vedas, whatever it may be, the way you read it is through a symbolic lens that the Kabbalistic perspective provides. Right, when you look at gematria and you look at numerology, these are central aspects of sort of Kabbalistic deciphering of information and true knowledge. And so this is incorporated into Theosophy. And so every spiritual text, it's never what it superficially reads, right? It's Blavatsky that is able to uncover the deep symbols. And that's why, if you have eyes to see, you'll see her symbolic interpretation. And so then it gets into Isis Unveiled. And I'm going to skip this because we talked a little bit in the video about it. And if you want this, again, this document is available over at the Logos Academy if you want the full document. But the purpose of the work to discredit Christianity, to undermine modern scientific materialism without returning to Christian theism, to elevate ancient paganism, Hermetic and Eastern traditions as repositories of true wisdom, and to produce the idea of a primordial wisdom religion. This is Isis Unveiled. This, as I said, this is the deconstruction. This is the boulder that she's throwing into Western civilization to create space for the secret doctrine. And what is its purpose? To present the complete metaphysical system behind all religions, myths, and sciences, to replace biblical creation with a cosmic evolutionary schema, to provide a total explanation of reality without any personal creator, and to create a new account of Genesis. And that's what cosmogenesis is about. That's what anthropogenesis is about. That's the way this book is structured, The Secret Doctrine. But what she's doing is just creating a new Genesis narrative so that people do not return back to Christianity as the materialistic worldview is threatened by Theosophy, essentially. And so my last point here, is Theosophy anti-Christian? Yes, it is. And here is my attempt to actually demonstrate why it is. It's anti-Christian. Well, this is what I could find. The way Jesus is presented by Blavatsky, he's an initiate, he's an adept, he's a moral teacher, he's a transmitter of hidden doctrine to only a select few. So she believes, she puts forth this idea that the apostles had something secretly taught to them that Jesus didn't teach to the rest of the world. A la every single Gnostic text in the Nag Hammadi scriptures, right? That's what all those Gnostic texts are about, is that no, we have the secret teaching. And so clearly this is Orthodox. You say, well, you just again separated, as I phrased it earlier, Jesus from Christ. Like that is anti-Christian. That's anti-Christ spirit. So Theosophy tends to negate or recode the pillars of Nicene Christianity. So revelation, what we depend on, turns into esoteric gnosis. Truth is hidden and decoded by initiates. Our personal God, Jesus Christ and the Holy Trinity, to impersonal absolute. The incarnation of our God becoming fully God, fully man, symbol of a universal Christ principle, initiatory attainment. The church and sacraments participating in the Eucharist and the salvific work and victory of Christ, it's optional exoteric shell. So she makes this whole argument that the sacraments of Christianity, the Eucharist, are exoteric diversions from the esoteric truth. Exoteric means public, esoteric means private, right? So secret, public. And she claims, the reason why what Christianity does is all of its rituals and all of its sacraments is to push people exoterically in a different direction so they'll never know the esoteric truth, right? So she views Christianity as like holding humanity back. And in a sense, it is from her Antichrist demonic worldview. Salvation by grace and communion, our worldview, is replaced by spiritual evolution by karmic law and initiation. Explicit antagonism towards church Christianity and clergy. And then replacement as wisdom, religion, universalism. So what does she say about Jesus Christ? Is an initiate. He is not the incarnate Logos. He's a highly advanced spiritual adept, a member of a secret initiatory tradition, and he is one teacher among many. Buddha, Krishna, Python. I don't know. The zeitgeist. You ever heard this idea before? You know, a la, when was the zeitgeist? What was that, 2012? When was the zeitgeist? It's like 2011, somewhere around there. It's like, Jesus is just a solar symbol. Jesus is just one of many teachers. You know, Jesus is part of the axial age. You see, you didn't know this. So Christ is not God incarnate, but a man who realized divine potential, which every single person then is trying to do. So she induces the Christ principle, rejection of the incarnation, reinterpretation of the cross, and theosophy of the cross is a symbol of initiation. It's an allegory of suffering for enlightenment. It's a mythic pattern repeated across traditions. There is no atonement and no objective redemption for her. Rejection of resurrection and judgment. Resurrection, symbolic awakening, right? You just need to be initiated. Very Masonic, right? You just have to die and be reborn. Hell just equals ignorance. Heaven just equals higher planes of consciousness. This replaces eschatology with metaphysics. Blavatsky's explicit criticism of Christianity is that early Christianity was esoteric. I mean, it was the Gnostic groups is the real form of Christianity, not the Orthodox Church, right? That's what she hated. The church suppressed the true teachings of the Gnostics, and the councils fabricated dogma for power. No, the dogma is essential for theosis to take place, right? That's why understanding Orthodox theology is so important. So when you come up to something like Theosophy, you can delineate the concepts of deification. Our deification is a participatory synergy that is personal, that requires willful volition to engage in with God. Theirs is a divination by knowledge, which is, again, totally in tandem with ancient Gnosticism itself. That's why for her, maybe orthodoxy and the councils were threatening, because the Byzantine Empire did go and smash and quell a lot of these Gnostic schools. That's why they had to flee the Byzantine Empire, and they didn't stop till they hit Armenia. And that's where you get the Tondrakians. Go look them up. Tondrakians, Paulicians, how they had to then flee eventually once Armenia became Christian again, had to flee from all their Gnostic groups, had to flee to Bulgaria, where they were the Bogomils, another Gnostic group. How the Bogomils then fled to southern France. You get the Cathars, the Albigensians. It's all connected. Hostility to clergy and dogma. She distinguishes between true Christians, like moral individuals, and the church as a corrupt, dogmatic, and authoritarian. And then replacement logic. Christianity is portrayed as a temporal vessel, a partial truth, a shell to be discarded once esotericism is recovered. And that's why it is. And the reason why it's Antichrist, it's anti-Christian, it's anti-incarnational, it's anti-ecclesial, it's anti-sacramental, it's anti-eschatological, and it's anti-personalist. On those 5 points alone, I think it's fair to say that Theosophy is anti-Christian. And so regarding its history and legacy, I just want to point out how Theosophy then breaks down moving forward is that you have the death of Blavatsky in 1891. And so then Theosophy Establishes the template of impersonal absolute, Christ as a principle, not a person, salvation as evolution plus knowledge, and then authority via hidden masters. Immediate schisms then emerge. Through the 1891 through 1910 period, you get Annie Besant warring with William Judge. It's Annie Besant that believes that Jiddu Krishnamurti is the second Christ, which we're going to see in the rest of our video here. Like Krishnamurti, and he was groomed. Like they took him. He was a Brahmin Indian, so he was of the higher caste in India. According to the story, Besant like saw him, and other theosophists saw him, and they knew that he was going to be the vessel of like the ascended spirit. That he himself was not the quote unquote savior, but he was the vessel that the spirit of the Maitreya, the Buddhist concept of the world teacher, the Maitreya was going to inhabit his body, and he was being groomed for this. And he had like a cult following. We're talking, he's like 10 years old. He's like 14 years old. And he's dressed like a Western gentleman. You know, he's not dressed like an Indian. And he's riding around in these luxurious vehicles with all these white theosophists with money, going to these dinners. And these wealthy Western people were coming to India, and they were convinced that Krishnamurti was going to be the world teacher, the savior of the world. I kid you not. So that was Annie Besant. So she's warring with Judge. You have geographic decentralization. So you have India is kind of the closest to what Blavatsky left. You have the U.S. branch that kind of breaks away and does its own thing. You have England doing its own thing. You have Germany doing its own thing. That's a la Rudolf Steiner. So Germany, you get then Anthroposophy. Germany kind of takes Theosophy and goes in its own direction with it. And so what did Rudolf Steiner do? 1902 to 1912, he leads the German section of the Theosophical Society. Breaks with Theosophy, founds Anthroposophical Society. His key modification is that he rejects the Eastern dominance, and he basically recenters Western esotericism around Christ, but still as an archetypal principle. Right? He just wants to keep Theosophy, but he wants to do away with the aesthetics of the East and bring it back to Western Christendom and give it that aesthetic. So he reinterprets Christ as a cosmic sun being, a la, again, Zeitgeist, emphasizes spiritual science, clairvoyant research, evolutionary epochs, and then institutional legacy. You probably heard of the Waldorf education, biodynamic agriculture, anthroposophical medicine. And so what did he keep with Blavatsky? The spiritual evolution, the initiatic elites, esoteric Christology, and again, different... more structured, European, culturally conservative, less overtly anti-Christian in tone, but non-Orthodox at the core. Then the other, so I argue, that's why I have only them, Rudolf Steiner and Alice Bailey are really the two biggest offshoots of the Theosophical. Now, there's many of them, and some of them are important, but I would say for today, like today's world, 21st century, Alice Bailey, Rudolf Steiner, probably the two most important. And so Alice Bailey, from 1919 to 1949, publishes 24 books. She claims, just like Blavatsky did, that it was dictated from a Tibetan master named Dewar Kul. And then she's the one that introduces that every New Ager believes is the age of Aquarius, planetary initiation, spiritual hierarchy governing world affairs. The aliens are here because we're using nuclear weapons, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a flash signal for the aliens to come here because they need to watch over us, right? That's just the ufology, the extraterrestrial dimension of all this stuff. So Alice Bailey, explicit global governance spirituality. Christ becomes a world teacher, one among several planetary avatars. So what Alice Bailey does is she then actually places Christ amongst all the world teachers. She kind of places Christ at the top of the world teacher list. Heavy emphasis on group consciousness, planetary service, and externalization of the hierarchy. This leads to the Lucis Trust, named after Lucifer himself, Arcane School. And so the transition is Blavatsky's metaphysics lead into planetary and political spirituality. This feeds directly into later New Age and technocratic spiritual imaginations. I put imaginaries. I should have put imaginations. Mid-20th century popularization. So 1950s to 1970s, you get post-war disillusionment, rise of psychology and self-help books, decline of church authority in the West, theosophical ideas detached from institutions. They basically become free-floating ideas within Western culture, reincarnation, karma, higher self. They enter pop culture. And then you get UFO phenomenon beginning with Roswell. And that gets reinterpreted through this theosophical esoteric framework. And esoteric metaphysics become psychologized. This leads into ancient astronauts, cosmic theosophy, 1960s to the present. 1968, you get Eric von Daniken, and he popularizes the ancient astronaut theory. And theosophical inheritance is that gods equal advanced beings, myth equals misunderstood technology, initiates equal contactees, evolution is guided by higher intelligences, structural continuity, masters, extraterrestrials, hidden hierarchy, galactic federation, revelations equals encoded myths. And then you get the full-blown New Age movement in the 1970s to today, really. But the foundations of it are from the 70s to the 90s. No creed, no church. Heavy borrowing from Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Carl Jung, and Eastern religions, of course, selectively. They don't want the caste system. They don't want any of the traditional stuff. And so core beliefs, all religion are one, consciousness is evolving, divinity is within, and authority equals experience. And so 21st century identity features spirituality as identity, moral signaling via beliefs, a la social justice, right? You signal your morality through your beliefs, modern progressive movement. Trauma healing language. Oh my gosh, that's a trigger word. You can't tell my trans friend that she's actually a man because her dick is showing, okay? That is hurtful and that triggers her. Do not dead name her. Trauma healing language, online gurus, influencers, algorithms, direct inheritance, Christ principle, Christ consciousness, karma, energy patterns, initiation, awakening moments, masters, guided downloads. So final transformation from Helena Blavatsky from the 1840s to the 1880s. You get Theosophy fully articulated. And it becomes New Age through Alice Bailey. And now it's personal brand spirituality all over social media. Every New Age account, every online social media guru. This is the general timeline. This is the general trajectory of how we got here. And that's why I think you can make an argument, a compelling, interesting argument, that Blavatsky was one of the most influential people of the 19th century. Now, was she the most influential person of the 19th century? No. But I think she's more influential than most people believe that she was. Because I think for many of us, you think Theosophy and you think, yeah, I know about Theosophy. You got those societies, but you know, it's not as big as it used to be. It's not that big. But the underground movement of these ideas and their saturation and normalization in Western culture, that is a big deal. And that is still with us today. And the average, especially woman, but the average liberal, spiritual, but not religious person you speak to is literally parroting ideas that Blavatsky set forth in a unique, captivating, modern vernacular for people to adopt and identify themselves with today. So I think that is interesting. All right, let's now watch the end of this documentary here, and we'll wrap up. Actually, let me catch up on some super chats. Oh, Darth Grumpy Dad became a Codal Crew member. Thank you so much, man. God bless you. Connor throws in 8, says, her father wasn't present either when you look at her childhood. Her theology seems to reflect how hoes think. No discernment, accept everything. Yeah, she didn't really have a father very present, but she did have her grandfather after the age of 11. So it wasn't like she had no man in the house, but she definitely did not have a close relationship with her dad, which was customary at the time in Russia. If you were a military officer and he was a colonel, If you're a military officer and your wife dies, the child was almost always watched over by the maternal parents. So yeah, she didn't actually have much of a relationship with her father. And in a way, she is like a proto-feminist. I mean, she was a feminist. Just the feminism wasn't as bad as it is today. It hasn't gone through its third and fourth wave. But yeah, she maybe that's why she hated the church and authority and hierarchy so much, is that she had daddy issues. Beyond Seraphim throws in 20, says, thoughts on Christos Giannaros. Is he worth reading? Yeah, I think he's definitely worth reading. I like Christos Giannaros. So Giannaros is more of a philosopher than a theologian. Florovsky, I would say, is more theologian than philosopher. They work in similar areas. Christos Giannaros is coming at orthodoxy from a phenomenological methodology. So if you're interested, there's the analytic and the continental tradition in philosophy. Giannaros is coming from the continental tradition. He's a Greek philosopher. I like it. I have his books on, what are all the ones I have? Where are they? Oh, here they are. No, that's Bradshaw. I have Postmodern Metaphysics, The Schism in Philosophy, and The Freedom of Morality. Those three right there are phenomenal, I would say. So if you're going to get Giannaros, I don't have all his books. I'm sure there's really good ones that I don't have. The three that I have, I actually have more of his, but the three that I would recommend is number one in regards to theology and Orthodox spirituality is The Freedom of Morality. Fantastic book. He's talking about how morality is the only way they can truly be free. And he's using very philosophical, theological language to articulate that. And then I would say number two, I really can't argue which one I like more, is Postmodern Metaphysics and The Schism in Philosophy. Those are the three books. So Freedom and Morality, number one, Schism in Philosophy, Postmodern Metaphysics, all those three, read the whole thing. I really like those books. So if you're going to get Giannaros, if one of those strike your fancy, do check it out. Some people don't like because he puts a lot of it in philosophical language. Some people don't like that. I like Giannaros though. I'm a Giannaros fan. Mr. Fist throws in 5, says, she sounds like all my worst exes rolled up into one minus the astrology. Sorry to hear that. Octavian throws in 2, says, she sounds nosy. MGM Studies throws in 5, says, sounds like they were making the Kwisatz Haderach from Dune. Yeah, pretty much. What's the name of the Krishna guy the Theosophists were propping up as Jesus too? Krishnamurti. So here, if I go here, we're going to watch it here in a second, but his name was Krishnamurti. This guy right here. Now he becomes famous afterwards, right? So he basically becomes a young man at the age of like 20 something and renounces everything. He renounces himself as the Maitreya. He renounces himself as like this world leader of theosophy, of any organized religion. And he becomes like a major, major spiritual figure. Was an Indian spiritual figure, speaker and writer, adopted by members of the Theosophical Society as a child. Krishna was raised to fill the mantle of prophesied world teacher, a role tasked with aiding humankind's spiritual evolution. In 1922, he began to suffer from painful seizure-like mystical episodes that would produce a lasting change in his perception of reality. In 1929, he broke from the Theosophy movement and disbanded the Order of the Star in the East, which had been formed around him. He spent the rest of his life speaking to groups and individuals around the world, hoping to contribute a radical transformation of mankind. So this is the guy that they thought was the second Jesus Christ. He was going to be the Maitreya in Buddhist theology, the final world teacher. Okay. Octavian throws in 10, says, great stream. Thank you. Well, thank you, Octavian. God bless you, man. Really appreciate that. Let me just double check Dono chat. Nothing over on Dono chat. And Matt Scroggins throws in another 5 over on Streamlabs. Thank you so much, Matt. He says, for the goal and to send a signal that you're doing a good job. Material is great, but you should grift harder for them dollar bills. I do need to grift harder for the dollar bills. Where we at? I haven't even checked, man. I get so into the topic sometimes I forget. We need 11 more super chats, and I'll be gifting 2 copies of my book to people. So I got 2 copies, Return to Babylon. They just came in, author copies. I will sign them and ship them to anybody in the continental United States if we reach the super chat goal of 30 super chats tonight. So it's up to you guys. I've been trying to give away. I tried to give away 2 books last time. So if you guys can help me out, be greatly appreciative of that. Okay. Let's now watch the rest of this video, and it's going to cover the Krishnamurti stuff. So there's about 10 minutes left. We're going to check this out, and you basically, if you watch this stream, you should basically know everything you need to know about Theosophy and Blavatsky from a Christian perspective.
As a result of the Atlanteans' moral decline, wars would break out, leading to the sinking of Atlantis and the destruction of the race. The 5th race, or the Aryan race, is the one we are in now. Here you see a focus on the intellect and material science. In fact, Blavatsky writes that we are in the later stages of the 5th age, and a new race is soon to emerge. In the 6th race, humans are to evolve higher psychic powers, such as energy manipulation and healing. They will become more ethereal, and wisdom and ethics will be the focus. Finally, in the far future, humans will reach the 7th race. Here they will reach an almost divine level, with full union of spirit and matter, able to live on several planes of existence at once. So rather than going through individual spiritual evolution, as is the case in Hinduism or Buddhism, Blavatsky teaches that the entire human race is going through it together. The secret doctrine would also expand on the world teacher. There is a much more intricate hierarchy than was present in Isis Unveiled, and the world teacher would be emphasized to be seen as the central figure, with the masters acting as their intermediaries. And not just does the world teacher provide knowledge, but awaken an entirely higher consciousness in humanity, linking them to the root races and making them necessary for humanity to progress and evolve into higher races. Even this is really just scratching the surface of the secret doctrine, as there are many more topics and teachings discussed. The following year, in 1889, Blavatsky would state that the main purpose of the Theosophical Society was to prepare the world for the arrival of a new world teacher, who would help to prepare humanity for the transition into the 6th root race. Not long after this, Helena Blavatsky would pass away in 1891. Even though Occult was the official president, Blavatsky was the real power in the society, and after her death, it wouldn't take long for issues to arise. Originally in the society's history, the lodges acted with very limited authority, with all major decisions having to come directly from the headquarters in India. However, over time, they would develop into national units with their own governing bodies. Without Blavatsky being able to rule on disagreements or stop factions, schism was inevitable. One of the members, Annie Besant, had become very influential.
Just a quick reminder, any of my nicotine users out there do get the best nicotine pouches on the market. ALP. Using my promo code, you'll get a discount. I am sharing that in the chat right now. If you don't use ALP, if you are a nicotine pouch user, I'm telling you they are the best ones. Use my promo code and you will get a discount. I'm telling you, just try them out. You will thank me later.
And she, along with Olcott, would accuse William Judge of forging letters from the masters. This would cause him to split from the group in 1895, taking not only the name, but most of the American branches and members with him. A year later, he would pass away, and the American organization would fracture again and a final time in 1909, leaving American Theosophists very splintered. The German-Austrian branch would grow in independence, and after philosophical differences broke out over disagreements relating to the world teacher with Annie, they would break away in 1913, forming a new society, changing their name and expanding to other countries. Going back to Annie Besant, she had originally joined the society after meeting with Charles Leadbeater in London, and believed herself to be a clairvoyant. After Olcott died, she would take over as president of the society and became very involved in Indian politics. At the time, India was still under British rule, but opposition to this had been growing over the years. Annie herself was British, but had converted to Hinduism. At the beginning of the First World War, she, along with other prominent people in India, would work to unify their groups into one organization. They would form the Home Rule League in 1916, an organization pushing for the self-governance of India. Although some members of the Theosophical Society, mainly those in branches outside of India, believed that the group should not focus on politics, the society would contribute significantly to this movement. The schools and institutions they had built taught Indian philosophy, the Vedas, Sanskrit, and worked to instill in their students a sense of national identity and pride.
Isn't it funny how they were in favor of national identity and pride in Sri Lanka and India, but certainly didn't feel that way in the West? Their whole goal was just to undermine and destroy Christianity. By the way, welcome Rattlesnakers over from Jake Rattlesnake's YouTube channel. God bless you guys. Smash that like. Appreciate you guys stopping in.
After Annie was arrested in 1917 by the British for spreading propaganda through a newspaper she had purchased, there would be widespread outcry, with figures such as Gandhi calling for her release. There would even be protests in the United Kingdom and the United States. She would be released later that year and elected as the chairman of the Indian National Congress. However, with the war ending and Gandhi growing in power, the society would become somewhat withdrawn from politics. Gandhi would become the head of the Indian National Congress in 1920, and even though he would credit them for their help, saying, Theosophists were the real friends of Indian culture, his movement would focus more on politics and less on spirituality.
Now that's while he's laying with very young women naked in beds in India, of course,
leaving Theosophy somewhat behind. This would work out as the society was now focused on the imminent arrival of the world teacher. In 1889, Blavatsky had shifted the focus of the society to preparing for the coming world teacher, and after her death, the next leader of the society, Annie Besant, would parrot this sentiment in 1896.
Now, isn't this ironic how Blavatsky and the entire Theosophical Society hated Christian eschatology, this idea that history had an end, right? And what have we seen in like Protestant sects that are so focused on the eschaton? You get these pre- and post-millennial movements who predict the day that the world's going in or Christ is going to come, or they're, just recently, I mean, what was it? In 2025, there was a movement here in America where a handful of evangelicals were convinced that the rapture was going to take place in 2025. There was the famous video of a girl on TikTok like selling everything she owned because she was fully convinced she was going to be raptured. Well, that entire obsession with the end time, it's like you make these predictions and then the time comes and of course nothing happens. And the same thing ends up happening to the Theosophical Society. They choose Krishnamurti, this Brahmin Indian boy. They bring him in, they educate him, they dress him up like he's a well-to-do young man, they educate him, and then they tell the world that he's going to be the world teacher, he's the Maitreya. And only to their deficit, once he grows up and he's supposed to now become the Maitreya, he renounces the whole thing. It's like exactly what happens to these evangelical or any sort of dispensational, eschatological movement that predicts the end point of history. It's like, even though they were so anti-eschatological, a very similar phenomenon happens to them. It's hilarious.
In 1909, Charles Leadbeater would return to the headquarters in India with an adolescent child, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who he believed was the vehicle of the world teacher. Charles claimed to see the greatest aura he had ever seen, free from any selfishness coming from the child. He would be taken in by the group at age 14 and educated extensively to prepare him for his role. Jiddu went along with this, even starting to see Annie as a mother figure. Now, Jiddu wasn't seen as the world teacher in his own right, but rather as the physical host that the spirit of the world teacher would incarnate into. They would compare this with ideas such as the Holy Spirit coming upon Christ after his baptism. Starting in 1911, his writings would be published in theosophical magazines and produced in booklets. And the same year, he would be taken to various European countries to speak to members. His tour would be put on pause due to the outbreak of the First World War. However, once the war had ended, he would resume his travels and begin giving a series of lectures all around the globe to prepare people for what he called the coming. In 1922, he finally settled in California, and that same year would have a series of strange experiences. On August the 17th, he would experience a sharp pain at the nape of his neck, only worsening over the next 2 days. He even appeared to fall unconscious, although would later claim that he was always fully aware of his surroundings. While in this delirious state, he claimed to have experienced a mystical union, reaching a state of unity with the universe. This feeling of immense peace would only grow in the following days as the symptoms intensified. His journal at the time contained such excerpts as, "Woke up early with that strong feeling of otherness, of another world that is far beyond all thought. There is a heightening of sensitivity not only to beauty, but also to all other things. The blade of grass was astonishingly green. That one blade of grass contained the whole spectrum of color. It was intense, dazzling, and such a small thing, so easy to destroy."
Sounds like Krishnamurti got into Blavatsky's laudanum. He was a little heavy on the opium, you know. He found her hash stash, and yeah, they were drugging him. They were doing something to him. They were definitely doing something to him. I mean, how strange would that be? You're a poor Indian boy, but you're from the Brahmin caste, and you get adopted by the Theosophical Society, and this white woman from England basically is now your mother, and they think you're going to be the world teacher. And then you grow up and you're in your 20s, you move to California, and that your whole life, this whole mission is getting ready to start, you know, like Christ's ministry at 30. And he's like, actually, all of this is wrong. It's not real.
These experiences would continue to occur for the remainder of his life. Several explanations have been offered, from epilepsy to the world teacher spirit descending into his body. The knowledge of these experiences manifesting in Jiddu would spread through the society, and this, along with a massive convention in 1925 to celebrate the 50th year anniversary, would cause many to believe that the arrival of the world teacher was at hand, and that the world was about to dramatically change. Their hopes would be dashed when in 1929, Jiddu would reject his role and leave Theosophy. He would denounce not only the organization, but all organized systems of belief.
I maintain that truth is a pathless land and cannot be approached by any path whatsoever, by any religion, by any sect. Truth being limitless, unconditioned, unapproachable by any path whatsoever, cannot be organized, nor should any organization be formed to lead or coerce people along any particular path.
Expectedly, this would have grave implications for the future of the group. Many members were left feeling lost and betrayed. The prophesied Messiah, who had been preparing for his role his entire life, had just abandoned them. There were fractures as some members left to follow Jiddu's new teachings, some leaving to start new groups, but many also just drifted away entirely. Although the society did not completely die out, it lost its wider influence and strength and never fully recovered to its former state. The headquarters in India, still the largest branch, would retreat from messianic prophecies and focus on stabilizing the society in the following years. They transitioned to education and the philosophy of Blavatsky's earlier work, as well as a focus on Indian nationalism and cultural identity. They became much more internal and basically turned from prophets into monks. Ideas of a coming Messiah were eventually rejected, and the group has remained largely unchanged over time. Even today, they are the largest Theosophy organization, often considered the mainline, with lodges in many other countries. The Theosophical Society overall has been incredibly influential, often credited for helping to make Eastern mysticism mainstream in the West, exposing a lot of Europeans to esoteric topics that would eventually develop into the New Age beliefs of today. Of course, in India, the group had the most effect. There are schools and parks named after important members, and even Banaras Hindu University, a major university in India, was originally founded by the society. They helped to revive Hinduism and Buddhism, but also to legitimize them in Western audiences. Honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Anyways, and Theosophy has continued to fracture ever since. And the cultural influence it once had is no longer there. I mean, Theosophy is essentially irrelevant at this point. But as I made the point today, and to re-summarize my premise, is that Helena Blavatsky and what she put forth through one ISIS Unveiled, which is the criticism of scientific materialism and Christianity, Volume 1, Scientific Materialism, Darwinian Evolution, Volume 2 is Christianity and Institutional Religion in the West, bulldozes those things over for the secret doctrine to come out later in the 19th century and essentially articulate this theosophical worldview of ascended masters, reincarnation, karma, higher selves. Jesus Christ is a cosmic principle. He's a world teacher, that we can ascend through knowledge, through Gnosticism, through this appropriating of spiritual gnosis. And that alone, the valorization of Eastern mysticism as on par with Western Christianity, which the perennialism before Blavatsky was more like this, as I said. They were all religions, like, again, if you were of the aristocratic elite, say all religions have some truth, but Christianity is clearly the highest cultural epitome of religious truth. And they were kind of perennialist. However, it's with Blavatsky that pyramid gets flattened, turned into an oval or a circle, and all religions are now equal and share an equal slice of the religious truth pie. That has been incredibly influential and still reverberates in the 21st century in all of the New Age, all of the ancient aliens or ancient astronaut theory, all of much of the eternal alternative history, all of the Gnostic esoteric groups of today are influenced by Blavatsky. And that's why I think you can really make an argument that she was one of the most influential people of the 19th century, but really not in a good way. She created the hidden architecture of the modern religion, which fits transhumanism. It fits, New Age gurus and the commercialism of social media spirituality and all this different stuff. So, I hope today's stream, again, a major thank you to Michael for sponsoring today's stream. Thank you very much, brother. Do appreciate the support. But I hope this stream was insightful and informative on who is Helena Blavatsky. What were her ideas? Where was she criticized as much of a forgery and actually faking some of her psychic abilities? But you can't deny that the woman left an imprint in history that is still felt today. You cannot talk to a person who identifies as spiritual but not religious and them not having adopted so many ideas set forth by Blavatsky that allowed them to become normalized in Western civilization. So with that, smash that like. Thank you guys. That's the stream for today. So I appreciate you guys for being here. Shout out to all the Jake Rattlesnakers that end up stopping in. God bless you guys. Chair throwing Italian throws in 5. Says, all religions shall redeem the card, Tsar. Funny. So it looks like we're a little short for our goal today. Our goal today was 30. So maybe next time we can send out some books. As I said, I'm flying Friday down to Texas to link up with Andrew Wilson and work with him on one of his new projects. So I'm not going to say what it is. I don't know if he's announced it yet. So I will be getting back from Texas with Andrew Monday night. So I may try to do a drama alert tomorrow night. I haven't fully decided. But I still got to pack. I got to do a bunch of stuff. So I may be able to get one more stream in before I leave Friday morning. But we will see. But anyways, what'd you guys think? Hello says, great stream. Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Well, thank you, Hello, for being here. Really appreciate you. Vigo says, great stream. Good night. Godspeed. Thank you very much. Marley says, can we please raid Bryce J, please? Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can raid whoever. I don't know who's live right now. I'll have to check. 07 from the Crucible Crusader. God bless you, brother. Thank you very much. Akathis, thanks, DPH. Great stream. Thank you very much. Great stream. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. You guys seem to like it. I know it was a lot of information today. Again, if you want access to any of the study guides on these topics I present, those are all available over at the Logos Academy. And if you guys are interested in sponsoring a stream, if you got a topic you want me to research and present like I did Blavatsky today, please support my work by sponsoring a stream. The link is in the video chat. And purchase. I'll reach out to you in email. Tell me a little bit about what the topic is or what you had in mind. You can't tell me what to present. So if you sponsor a stream, you can't tell me what to present. I know I had one guy want me to present something I wasn't going to present, but you can tell me the topic. Tell me the topic. Maybe there's specific areas about a topic you want me to dive into. Let me know, sponsor a stream, and then I will spend at least a day or 2 days just researching that for a stream. So Silvergore says, I had seen the video, but Dr. DPH commentary was good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This is one of the vids you'll have to point people towards for future reference. Well, thank you, MGM Studies. Appreciate that. Will do. Will do. All right, guys. Well, major thank you to everyone. Let me just double check, make sure I don't miss anybody over on the Dono chat. Oh, Justin Henley throws in 10 on Dono chat. No comment. Thank you very much, Justin Henley. And let me just double check Streamlabs before we hop out of here. So who'd you guys want to go see? Bryce J? Who you guys wanting to raid next? Let me see who all is even live right now. Bryce J. What's Bryce J's channel? I have Bryce J up, but I don't see his channel. It's just Bryce J. That's what I thought. I'm subscribed to him. It's not popping up. It's not popping up for me. Maybe he doesn't allow. Have you guys rated him before? Bryce J. Official. Bryce J. Official. Oh yeah, he doesn't. I can't rate him. He doesn't have it where he needs to redirect privileges needed. He needs to add me to their live direct list in the community settings. So I can't. Sorry guys, can't redirect you over there, and I don't see any of our friends live right now. Yeah. When you go over there, though, tell him that I was going to rate him, but he needs to set it up in settings. He doesn't have it where anybody can just raid. He has it only where, I guess, a select few people. I don't know if he's even chose, so let him know. But anyways, guys, smash that like. Thank you so much for the support tonight. And if I can, I'm going to do another stream tomorrow night If not, I'll see you after my trip to Texas, which will be Tuesday or Wednesday. So, as always, until then, God bless.